All right, so let me give more of my bio, and then we'll dive in. We got a lot of time, so really excited to be here. I love this stuff. I love talking about it. As I mentioned a little bit, I was born in Pennsylvania, actually born in Philadelphia. Cousins live in Philly, so it's fun to go see them. They're like, yo, cuz, what have you been up to, you know? So I enjoy that. In fact, my daughter Ellie and I went to an Army-Navy game year before last, and so my cousins literally live like a mile from Lincoln Field, so we went and had hoagies ahead of time. They dropped us off, picked us up. It was really fun to be there. So after that, I moved to Texas, went to high school in Texas. I got to go to Boise State in Austin, loved Austin. Austin's, in my opinion, by far the nicest city in the state of Texas. So, and then I got appointed to the Naval Academy and really had a great experience there, other than the first semester, probably first year, but it got a lot better after that. And served in the Navy. I flew in the Navy. I flew P-3 Orions. I was based at Moffett Field in California, which is right outside of Mountain View. So I flew throughout the Pacific, everywhere from Adak, Alaska to Fiji, and from California all the way to Masiro, Oman. So I covered about half the world on a couple of deployments, which was really cool. And then I got moved to the East Coast, and I was an instructor pilot in Jacksonville, Florida. So I got to fly on the East Coast and flew pretty much all over the Atlantic and into the Med. And so that was really fun. But when my time came up, you know, I said, look, I think there's more for me in this world than just in being a naval officer. Not that that's not an aspiring thing to do or to achieve, but I just had this kind of like, I'm missing something. And so most of my peers were getting out and going to the airlines. And I thought, okay, that'll be a cushy job, but I just can't give myself that privilege. So I applied to business schools and got accepted at UVA and at Chapel Hill. And at Chapel Hill, for some reason, they decided that they wanted to pay for my education, so I gladly took that route and had a great experience there. I was so glad to have my experience at Navy, because that first year, and if you guys have anything like it, it was just a killer. So I've never studied so many hours in my life. So I feel like I learned as much from my classmates as I did from my professors, and hopefully you're finding the same thing. So I was a big sponge, and I could talk about leadership or organizational management, but I didn't know a thing about finance or marketing or operations or any of these subjects. So it was really great to be able to have that engagement, and hopefully you guys are doing that with each other. And so after that, I got recruited to the Coca-Cola company. I was an intern there. I was in their USA division. Like I mentioned earlier, I was a finance guy. Fortunately, there was a general management curriculum, so I got to see some of the other stuff. Was really bored in USA finance. So I said, can you at least show me somebody over in the international side? And I met this guy named Tom McGuire. And the next thing I knew, I got the chance to interview and got a job supporting Coca-Cola in their European group. So I was supporting financial analysis for Italy and the UK and the Benelux countries, and that was fun. I mean, even if I didn't get to see these guys on a daily basis, I got to talk to them, and I started learning a little bit of Italian because my background is Italian. So that was fun. At one point, I was like, "Buongiorno, come stai?" And they were like, "Da da 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 da." I was like, "Okay, I'm done talking in Italian. Can we switch to English, please?" So 10 years at Coca-Cola, half of them in finance, and then I jumped ship into marketing right when the Atlanta Games were coming. So I had the chance to work on negotiating sponsorships with the Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, with NASCAR, a lot with NASCAR. And because of the Olympics, I got involved with that and Coke's involvement with that. And from that, there was the Worldwide Licensing Group was selling at the time co-branded Coca-Cola Olympic merchandise. That was the first time I'd ever been exposed to licensed merchandise. And I was like, okay, how is that different than promotional merchandise? Well, it's vastly different. So, the idea in my mind is, and it's probably this is too pejorative, but Promotional merchandise is that t-shirt you get at an event, you wear it one time, you wash it, it shrinks, and you use it to wash your car. Whereas hopefully licensed merchandise is something you chose that's got the brands you love on it, and it's high quality, and you wear it just like you would wear any other favorite shirt or jacket or whatever. So we'll get into that in detail, but yeah, I was always like, okay guys, we have to design this with people who are willing to open their wallets and pay for this. Versus, I know you want to give away this red shirt that says Coca-Cola, but not everybody wants a Coca-Cola red, 100% red shirt. So maybe if you're at UTA, you might take it, but probably not many other places. So that's when I got involved initially in licensing, and got to, my cool thing was I started in event merchandising, which was all these co-branded programs. So Coke with the Olympics, I worked on the inaugural Olympic Games. Coke with FIFA World Cup, so I got to work on France '98 World Cup. And I was always like, this is great. Not only do I get to do this licensing thing, but I actually go to these events. So first time to really spending time with both of those in Japan and in France. And then I did a lot of work with NASCAR. The first ever Dale Earnhardt Jr. race together was at a Coca-Cola 500 race in Tokyo, Japan, which was weird. It was after like the regular season was over, and so we decked out a red car because Dale Sr. always rode in a black car, so he's like, I want to drive in a Coca-Cola car, and we put his son Dale Jr. in this polar bear black car, and they both raced, and we sold $30 million of licensed merchandise in 6 weeks. So it was like a big, opportunity to like crystallize this and literally there was crystal cars. But the idea that this was the first ever race between one of the greatest drivers ever and his son, and everybody wanted to buy it. And I remember going on QVC, and we were selling these jackets. And you watch this ticker, and I don't watch QVC very much, but that night I was, and it was like tick, 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 tick. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're selling like thousands of these jackets. So I was like, this is real. This stuff is really real. I mean, ultimately, I think, how much did we sell? I know, I think about $50 million of total licensed merchandise my second year, 30 of which was for NASCAR, and then another 10 was for the Olympics, and then a mix of everything else. FIFA was probably about a couple million of that, but a whole bunch of other things. So, and in that 50 million that we sold, we earned about $3 million of royalty revenue for the Coca-Cola company, which then they used to pour back into marketing because we were part of the marketing department. So that's pretty cool as a general manager or chief marketing officer to go, look, I've got this department, and at the time I think Coke was producing about $30 million of licensed royalty, and so that was a huge boost to the chief marketing officer for him to be able to spread that wherever he wanted to help grow the brands. Left Coca-Cola in a reorganization and did a couple of .com stints. Ultimately ended up working on the Salt Lake Olympics for just a contractor role, oversaw the design and build of all of the consumer activations. So there was this 10,000 square foot space called Coke on the Ice, where you could push a bobsleigh or shoot a hockey puck or push a curling stone. And that was fun. That was really getting into more of a brand engagement. And then I was responsible for 2 pin trading centers, one at the Salt Lake Olympic City and one up in Park City, and 2 5,000 square foot spaces, and did a lot of trading, sold a couple $1 million in like 2 weeks, which was kind of, it's just amazing to see the power of the Olympic brand and the Coke brand. After that, ended up going to an experiential marketing agency called Tula Communications. We did a whole bunch of things, but the biggest, coolest thing that I got to do was help pitch to be the agency of record for Samsung for the 2004 Olympic Torch Relay, which was the global torch relay. So we started in Sydney, Australia, and went through 34 cities in 27 countries in 35 days. So literally Sydney, Melbourne, Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing, Delhi, Cairo, Cape Town, Rio, Mexico City, LA, St. Louis, Atlanta, New York, Montreal, and then all throughout Europe, all those. It was every host city of the Summer Games, plus a couple of others that were bidding to go, like Madrid and New York City and a few others. So that was really amazing. It's kind of a blur. I kept a journal, and one day I'll read it. But just like literally 3 hours a day of sleep and not always 3 at the same time. So. And then from there, got recruited to Rubbermaid to run Rubbermaid's global licensing business, which we'll talk about in depth, so looking forward to that. Got promoted out of there to run a small business called CardScan, that was based in Boston at the time. It was literally, you take your business card, and there was a little tiny scanner, and you'd literally feed your card through it, and it would take this analog information and put it into a database. Pardon?
I remember this.
Yeah. It was, I really loved it. It was a little, not global, but multinational business. I think we were in like 15 countries. It was about $20 million business. And it was just really cool technology. And I had all these ideas about how to do some things where like you could click on the address and it would take you to a GPS and it would take you, all that stuff that we have today. And I was like, in 2008, it didn't exist. I was talking to the group president and clearly I saw that he wasn't agreeing with me, and the next thing I knew they were like shutting that group down, and it was too advanced for Newell Rubbermaid. They were used to selling like totes. So I got the opportunity to start my own business in 2009, so literally, gosh, right about this day, 8 years ago, I launched my company, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'll stop with this, but the first thing I got to do was work on the 2010 Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver. So it was a great way to start out. It went a little down, but now it's come back up. So just really have loved working with Coca-Cola on anything, but especially on the Olympics. So that was long-winded, but hopefully that kind of, you'll be able to pull from that and go, well, you were talking about this, and I'm looking forward to that. So we're going to talk about brand extension and licensing. So I thought the first thing would be kind of cool is to go through some brand extension examples, some successful ones, and we can talk about why they're successful, and then some unsuccessful ones, and why they weren't successful. So here's an example of Motorola. And what you'll see here is kind of a progression, right? If you start on the left side and go right, it starts with kind of the core business, which at that time, this is a couple years old, was mobile devices. So they're still great at, mobile devices, two-way radio kind of thing. And then from there to more formalized two-way radios, to cordless phones, to weather radios, to baby monitors. And so if you think about the core business of Motorola, which we talk about brand equity, mission critical communication. That's what they say their brand is about. So the idea that being reliable in all kinds of conditions is what they stand on, you can see how that could really be instrumental and important as you go down that brand extension calendar or kind of pathway. Some of these things, and a lot of times what happens is a company will start out really successful in a core category, and then ultimately they lose their way, or the industry changes so much that they cannot be successful in it anymore. They just financially can't do it, and I'll give you an example of that in 2 seconds. And so when they do that, when that happens, if they're smart, they'll go, look, there's companies out there that do this better than we do, but our brand means this, so let's go find that company, license them our brand, let them market and sell this. We will turn what may be a negative as far as the bottom line is concerned into a positive, and the experience with the consumer and the brand affinity will even grow because the product that they'll be engaged with is actually superior than what we're doing. So an example of that when I was at Newell Rubbermaid running Rubbermaid's program was kitchen tools and gadgets. So Rubbermaid was like one of the first to ever create the spatula or the turner. And so that was a category that they helped define. But by the time I was there was like over 100 different stock keeping units. So everything, potato peeler to you name it, right? And the company was not equipped to do all those well. And so it went from a very profitable business, one that was really engaging, especially with moms in the kitchen, to now we're losing money on this. And so we're not investing in it, and so the quality of the products were deteriorating, and they were literally losing, and they were about to exit the category. I'm like, wait a second, this category is ours. So I was able to find a company in Buffalo, New York called Robinson Home, and they were experts at it. That's what they did, and they were a licensing machine. So they only cared about creating the products, and then they found all these different categories of brands, or different brands that they went after. So they were in Oneida, which was a stainless steel kind of mid price point. They were with Calphalon, which was a sister brand of where we were, which was kind of mid-high. Culinary Institute, so real high, and then even down at Sunbeam, so low. So they had all the gamut covered. And so when I approached them and said, hey, would you consider licensing Rubbermaid? They were like, we've been trying to license your brand for about 5 years, like thankfully, and I was like, great. So we put it over to them. They infused all of this technology. They really upped it with the brand, with the plastics and the rubbers, and it was just so much. It was like great to look at these products and go, our brand is going to be, this is going to be our brand on the shelf in a profitable way and not have to worry about exiting the category. So here's another example, Arm & Hammer. So everybody knows that for baking soda, and we put baking soda in our refrigerators because of why?
Smells. Smells. It absorbs smells.
Okay, yeah, I was like, right. It takes away smells, and so naturally, that's what they've kind of said, look, this is what we're great at, is, complete odor elimination. And then when I was growing up, and I'm a lot older than you, I mean, I remember my mom like putting baking soda on her toothbrush and brushing with it, and I was like, okay, so that makes sense if that's how to brush your teeth when you maybe don't have toothpaste, or maybe that's preferred to toothpaste. Arm & Hammer comes out with a baking toothpaste, which is just something that was already being done anyway, so of course that should be kind of the first category. And then, to laundry detergent, and ultimately to, it's a little bit smaller for me to see, but kitty cat remover, and even like vacuum cleaner bags, I think. So they've really said, look, we know what we're great at, and this, wherever there's an odor, we probably should have some kind of involvement in that category. And so none of these do they make except for the baking soda. But the other thing to remember is this is a progression, right? So they may not be able to go immediately into kitty litter or into other categories that are far away without starting first at their kind of core and going to something that they're already doing or expected to do, like vacuum cleaner bags. It would be a natural transition or progression, but something that probably can't happen right away. So Arm & Hammer, sorry, not Arm & Hammer, Mr. Clean, P&G. I love this because this is, first it was just a liquid cleaner, right, for floors to get out the toughest stains. But, they did P&G, so I love P&G because it's just a phenomenal company as far as understanding brands and how to grow brands. So they're all about research, right? How do people use our liquid cleaner? What would they want? And then it just became obvious that, well, if you have the liquid cleaner, there should be a special mop for it, and therefore there should be a special bucket for it. And if you're going to have those two, then there should be gloves. And then in addition to that, well, maybe how about a broom and a dustpan? And they just created this whole collection. And the thing that I love about, and we'll get into this in detail later, but the idea with licensing is you're not investing in this. You're investing in your brand, and you're making sure that all the controls are right, but some other company is paying for all this. So when you think about, and I'll show this to you later, a big display that's 4 feet wide and maybe 10 feet tall, and it's got your brand all over it, and 80% of the products on there you don't make. Think about the value of just that on the shelf in the consumer market space. How about this one, Jell-O? There's a gelatin, and then it's a pudding. I don't even like Jell-O gelatin. Who here likes Jell-O gelatin? Okay, why do you like it?
I just like Jell-O.
You just like Jell-O. Did you ever make it at home? That's probably part of the reason we used to make it at home when I was young. How about you, Justin?
Just the same. I mean,
Yeah.
we used to make it at home, and quite honestly, it's just the only brand that my mom used to buy. So
Okay.
I like
Yeah.
this made with vodka.
The shot.
So I'm a lover of Jell-O pudding. I just think that probably should have been the first category, but I think it was the second one. But then the idea that you go to pudding pops, I'm like, that's genius, right? You know, if you love Jell-O, then, I mean, like, why didn't you think of this 10 years before? So to me, that's just like the brand, you love the brand, and then they do things like that, and you're just like, okay, it makes perfect sense. So that one, and then, you know, it just, who knows where they could go next with it, but they understand their brand, and so you kind of know that the next one they come out with will probably be just as amazing, and we will all be glad that they came out with it. How about this one? With a name like Smuckers, it has to be good. I was like, that's such a name. But I mean, jelly, I mean, anyone here ever put jelly on, who here eats pancakes? Let's just start with that question. Okay. Who here ever put jelly on pancakes? Anyone? Not anyone here. Well, not that I did a lot, but I know that, like, if you didn't have any syrup, that was what you did. So the idea that they would create a syrup is not a stretch, because a lot of people actually would put like their Smucker's jelly on their pancakes. So now to create pancake syrup is just like a no-brainer. And then to go to ice cream toppings, well, it's all about enhancing the flavor, right? So when you put Smucker's on something, it just gets better. It's kind of like an ingredient brand concept in a different way, but it's just like we partner with things, and whatever they are, we make it better. So now it's ice cream, who knows what it could be next time. So just, and the other thing to look or take away is, look at just the branding, right? The quality of it from one category to the next is just perfectly on visual standards and communication and all that. So it's all done exceptionally well. All right, so we've gone through all the examples of successful. Yes, sir?
I was just going to ask, are you going to go through in more detail how those relationships work between?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just waiting
Okay.
your appetite. We have 3 hours.
I'm very, very curious. Yeah.
I was curious in the inverse too, where you have a product you've developed that you give to somebody else, and but your name's not on it. Like Force Flex with Procter, right? They gave it to Kimberly Clark because they couldn't get into the track bag business, but no one knows Procter owns that underlying technology.
And Procter's huge at doing that, right? Technology, licensing. Yeah, I'll definitely get into that. I'll give you an example though. Literally, I had a conversation, was it yesterday or the day before? This guy, he's actually from Atlanta, which is kind of cool because usually my calls come from anywhere. But he used to be a caddy, and of course, you know, you're lugging around a bag with all those clubs. Those are really heavy. So he came up with an idea where he's like, you know, why should you have 14 clubs in your bag? Why should you have 14 shafts and 14 different heads? I'll just create a device where I'll have one club, and then I'll just take the head and connect the two. And so now you put the same club on, whether it's your putter or your driver or your irons or anywhere in between, and it works. So clearly I've got a lot of questions about it, because I'm like, okay, how good is this? But if the technology is good, right, if the mechanism to connect the club with the head is good, then you can take that to a Callaway, a Titleist, a Nike, and let them use their quality or technology and all the other stuff. I mean, we might be like, this might be the next thing to like wheels on suitcases. Like, why didn't anybody, I mean, why did it take 1,000 years to put a wheel on a suitcase, right? So who knows where it's going to go, but the idea of technology licensing and enhancing brands is definitely something that we'll talk about. So yeah, so it's important, I think, to go through some examples of unsuccessful, because the reason I'm doing this is you have to think about brands and brand extension first before you can think about brand licensing, because licensing is just a tactic used to extend a brand. So this was not licensing, right? This was Coke trying to figure out how to like right their ship that was kind of sinking, you know, because back when, who is, anyone not familiar with the new Coke concept? Okay, so everybody is familiar. It's all right if you aren't. I was alive, you might not have been. But I think it was like 1986 or something like that. I think I was in the Navy at the time. So the idea was that Coke was losing share to Pepsi one-on-one, and there was this whole taste test, and when you tried Pepsi in a taste test. It won because it was ultimately a little bit sweeter. But at the end of the day, that's not why people love brands. They love brands for all the other reasons. And so when this came out, people were like, why'd you hijack my brand? This is not yours. Yeah, you get to make it for us, right? So fix it. And I think it was in the span of 4 months, they went from New Coke to reintroducing back Coca-Cola's Coca-Cola Classic. And it's like the greatest marketing feat ever, because now it was like, oh my gosh, if we don't start drinking this, they'll have to get rid of it. And so, share spiked, and grew, and we went back into #1. I say we because I used to work at Coke, and I bleed Coke red. But it was a phenomenal success after a phenomenal failure. And I think they kept New Coke around for a while just to steal a little bit of share from Pepsi. I don't know if it still exists today, but it was really a disaster. I mean, it really was. So you're going to Colgate.
Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed about this.
So why don't you tell us about it?
It's Colgate, for whatever reason, thought that the extension of the frozen meal business would be a positive one, and it flopped dramatically because there was just no fit between a toothpaste brand and food. I mean, someone was able to do some mental gymnastics and be like, well, it all goes in your mouth, so we know this field, and it just didn't work out. So.
And as a brand manager, and as a somebody hopefully that will get to steer the ship at Colgate, there's so many great things. And look, there's examples of this, but it's kind of funny to see that, like you have to really stretch your brain to go, okay, well, we're great at, oral hygiene, but it's related to putting something in your mouth. We might actually be good at food. Because we know that, you make a brand promise and you have a brand position, and what we do when we do extensions has to reinforce that brand's promise and the position. So if I can only imagine what the brand promise and position were for Colgate, I don't think they had anything to do with nutrition.
But in a room full of smart people, no one raised their hand and was like, no? Or was everyone just getting a resume ready quietly to go somewhere else? Like,
I wonder if it was like the Emperor wore no clothes, right? Whoever, the CMO, whoever was like, we're going into this. And everyone was like, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. Let me redo my resume. Fortunately, they're really great at toothpaste, so that could come and go. But I'm glad you heard of it. When I saw this house, I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Probably didn't last long enough to know. How about this? Bic perfume. What do you think about that, ladies?
That's horrible. I would never.
I think truck stop.
Yeah.
I think I've made a lot of terrible life decisions, and now I'm using big perfume.
I wouldn't even. I'd be curious, but I don't think quality would do that.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're willing to spend, and I don't know how much it costs, but like $80 an ounce or maybe $150 an ounce for perfume, because it's got all of these qualities that are going to make you feel better about yourself, or more attractive, at least in your own level of confidence. Well, a throwaway brand, which is what Bic stands for, with pens and with razors, is kind of like counterintuitive. But they also came out with, I know they came out with underwear, which is another one that was a dismal failure. I'm trying to think, there was one more. Kind of crazy. I don't really slam Sony for this one because this wasn't their fault, really.
well, wasn't it a licensing thing? They refused to give up the underlying technology to other companies that wanted to make betas.
Yeah,
And so
it was kind of like the Apple kind of thing. We want to be the only one, and the competition
it was a
is.
vastly superior product.
It did well in some circles though, right? Like it may not have been a massive success, but I know the NFL used beta tapes for a really long time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the closest analogy I can think of is like Apple with theirs, but they found a way. And think back before there was any kind of mobile communication, right? Apple was a seller of portable computers, right? So that's all they did, but they did carve out a niche and they got into education, and even though they were 10% of the market, there was such a loyal following that it was large enough market that they could still be very successful. I just think with Betamax, even though it was a superior product, it wasn't large enough, and because they weren't willing to be more open, it just wasn't, it never reached critical mass. So it's kind of a little bit an oddball, but I like it because it just gets you to think about, how can you make a brand extension successful? So there's lessons, and there'd be a great case study about this for the reasons other than maybe the quality of the product or the brand.
Whoa.
That hurts your eyes, doesn't it?
No.
Apple Maps. This is where you go, okay, Apple, you make a phenomenal platform, but stay away from some of these apps. Let other people. That's why you've created the ability to connect with apps. So
Had this not been a debacle, do you think it actually would have been a reasonable extension? Had the actual system worked, the actual application worked as well as, say, Google Maps, would that have actually been a smart move for Apple?
I think so. Again, whenever I think of an extension, I always go, okay, what does the brand stand for?
Mhm.
What's its brand's position? And does the extension reinforce the brand position? Is there a competitive point of view that the brand can bring to this category? And if the answer is yes, then you go, okay, then there's like 5 criteria, and maybe I'll get to this later, but does the extension support the brand's promise and position? And if that's yes, then does it support the brand's equities? And if that's yes, then does the brand bring a competitive advantage to the category? And if that's yes, then does the extension potentially have a negative association that could hurt the core brand? Yes, sir.
So what if the answer to all those questions is kind of? Because when I see this, I really think they just didn't want people using Google Maps. They would rather have them use Apple Maps. So if the answer is maybe or kind of soft yes to each of those, is there merit to go ahead and do it just so you're not getting people to use a competitor versus even though it's not a perfect fit for you? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you're saying absolutely right, and there are examples where people license just a block, right? I've been involved in scenarios where somebody's licensed a brand and they have a contract written such that they could just pay the minimums and not have really any obligation on the execution because it was written, they were smarter than the company that licensed them the brand, and then they did nothing with it, just to keep it from going to a competitor. So I think technically that can work, but I think if you're really a brand steward, you would never do that. Especially Apple. I mean, come on, right? Everything you do is about the brand. That's why there's not a whole bunch of, there could be so much Apple, think of the categories, but like a tire, right? It's a lifestyle, right? But there's none of that. And they purposely chosen not to, because I'm sure they'd be lining up by the dozens to be the first one and pay them tremendously to do it. So I would say there might be a business decision or reason, but if you're really about brand stewardship, you would say no. An example of that is when I was running the event licensing business at Coke. We were working on the inaugural Olympics, and my metric for the year for that for 1998 was $1 million in royalty revenue. And I had a company in Japan come to me and say, we would like to license your brand, we'll pay you $1 million in minimum guaranteed royalties. So that's the minimum you're gonna get, and you might get 2 or 3 times that, if you'll let us license the brand with the Olympics for lighters. And from a business decision, I made my budget for the year, all of its upside, how good would that have been for me, right? Crushed it, right? Big bonus. But lighters are connected to cigarettes, which is connected to cancer, which is something that Coke wants to be 1,000 miles from. And while I might have added $1 million in royalty revenue, or even $2 million, I might have destroyed brand equity by 5 billion, right? So that's kind of part of the thing you have to think about or consider. How about the Zoom? Does anyone even know what a Zoom
They
is?
tried.
Yeah. Is there a MP3 player?
This thing was so heavy. So
What was that?
I've got a story about this. And my daughter Ellie knows my wife Emily really well. In fact, Olivia knows her pretty well too. So she was just messing with me, and I think at the time I didn't have an iPod. I guess that was the music platform. And so she's like, "I'm gonna get you a Zoom for Christmas," and I'm like, "I don't want a Zoom." She's like, "No, that's brand new technology. You're gonna love it." I'm like, "Don't give me a Zoom." Sure enough, she bought me a Zoom, and I was like, I'm like, "Send this thing back," and I think she did. But it was so flippin' heavy. I mean, it was like a disaster waiting to happen. So, it's just like, you guys don't have any equity in this space. Why are you here? Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was gonna ask something about the previous slide.
Oh, we
I
can go
don't mean
back.
to interrupt.
No. Please stop me.
When you were
Just keep
talking
talking.
about the Coke and the lighter deal,
Yeah.
from the lighter manufacturer's perspective, what kind of benefit do you think that having the Coke brand would have for them? I just don't see a fit either way.
I think it was, and who knows, I'm maybe speculating here. Maybe they couldn't get a deal directly with the Olympics, and so this was an alternative route to get the Olympics. But I would think another possibility could have been that Japan at the time, and I think it's still this way, but maybe not quite as much, I think the market share for Coca-Cola in Japan was like 80%. I mean, and there was no Pepsi there. It was just like small local brands and Coke. In fact, Georgia Coffee, which is funny, Georgia Coffee, was actually outsold Coke in Japan at the time by like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. They would sell this in vending machines, hot or cold, canned coffee. I mean, that's like a sacrilege, right? Like Georgia Coffee, who would want to drink that? It was like the biggest profit maker I was just it's like what you learn when you work in the international market. So for me, I think it was because the market share was so great, and it was the Olympics. So it might have been more than anything a piece of memorabilia versus one that but it would also be kind of cool. Like let me pull out my Coca-Cola Olympic lighter and light the cigarette or a cigar.
But it would be Coke's logo with the Olympic.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was co-branded.
Okay.
So I'm probably confident a lot of it was they wanted the Nagano marks on there, for sure. And they were using Coke to get to them.
Right.
All right. Brand extensions fail when there is a disconnect between a brand, its positioning, and the target company. Let's look at one more example. Stanley. Now I can say I know the folks that are managing Stanley's program today, and it's really good. But at the time, which was 1999, Stanley began a licensing program that resulted purely on the merits of the fact that their business was sucking. And they were like, how do we squeeze some assets to get some royalty revenue, which will hit our bottom line, and we'll get to how that all works. But basically, you license your brand for a certain percentage of the revenue, and you have very little activity. Somebody could have a collateral duty of being responsible for the approval process. And so pretty much all of the royalty revenue falls to the bottom line. So they wanted to, and in fact, when I was at Rubbermaid, we had that going on. It was not centrally located. It was located amongst all the division presidents. And one or two of them were like, okay, I gotta hit this number on the top line, I gotta hit this number on the bottom line. My top line number's fine because I'm selling stuff for pretty much giving it away. My bottom line number sucks. So if I sell some licensing deals, I can shore that up and I can ensure I get my bonus next year. So there was nothing about anything to do with the brand. It was more of personal enrichment. So through an agency, they extended to near neighbor categories. So near neighbor, that's kind of like, okay, throw out brand management and just go, okay. Colgate, perfect example. Near neighbor, tooth, tongue, let's just put it right next to each other. So just kind of a crazy way of thinking about it. Their goal was to offer a broad range of products without encouraging a SKU buildup. Well, that's interesting because they got a huge one. Ultimately 800 SKUs, and it was, in my mind, a license to print money and a real disaster. So here are all the things that they extended. So Stanley's mostly about hand tools, you know, and really kind of craftsmanship. And so the idea of a workbench makes perfect sense. And even a pocket knife is kind of could be a tool, so that you can kind of see that. But you know, then you get gardening implements and portable fans and heaters and playing cards. I mean, look, they clearly were like, just go out there and sell the crap out of this thing, and hopefully we'll get something back, you know. And then the one that just took the icing, took the, you know, there was the pinnacle of the worst. It was this Christmas tree timer, which, I mean, it's just a sorry looking product. And you have to squint to see that little Stanley logo on there. And what I talk about is the 10 pitfalls of brand licensing are no logo slapping is one of them. So how do you prove it's not been logo slapped or has been logo slapped? Take the logo off, and if you can tell the brand what brand it is, then you've probably done a good job of building the brand's attributes into the product. And if you cannot, then you have not. And so you peel that off of there and it's just a black box. So to me, this was just like horrible, 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 horrible one. So needless to say, this to me was just somebody abusing the heck out of their brand. But this is what they look like today. So they kind of learned their lesson and said, okay, what are we good at? What should we do? They developed some great visual standards. They built probably a great style guide, made sure that they found great partners. And I would say, after you have your process defined, the next best thing, which goes in the case of companies in general, is find a great partner, right? If you're going to be hiring, find the best employee, you know, the person who's going to get it done. And if you're thinking, extending that kind of thinking, then if you find a company that's better at what they do than what you do, then they're going to be fabulous. The rest of it's going to take care of themselves because their standards are probably as high or higher than your standards. So I think they've done a great job with that, and you know, the gloves and the sound attenuators and you know, the flashlight, they all make perfect sense for this brand. And they're really, I mean, I would argue that I could pull some tools out of my toolbox and that branding is better than what Stanley has done in the past.
So they merged with Black & Decker, right?
Yes. And I can't really, I mean, it's gotten complex. Stanley, in some categories it's with Black & Decker, and it's funny because my eldest son, Ellie's brother, is at Stanley Black & Decker up in Boston, having fun working at that company. He actually was at Rubbermaid. He was in their tools division, Irwin, and then he got recruited over to Stanley Black & Decker. So, but the company or the agency that's responsible for the program is called Beanstalk, and they've really come a long way in the quality of their licensing programs. Wow. Sorry, disregard the 9 to 12. How are you guys doing? We've been talking for about an hour. Everybody need a break or good to go for a little bit longer?
I've got to go longer.
All right, let's press on, and we'll see where we go. So we went through brand extension examples, desired outcomes and objectives is what we'll talk about, and look at brand extension and licensing process, so we'll get to the specifics. We'll talk about Rubbermaid case study, and then there's a little mock negotiation, and then we'll wrap up. So, let's find out some desired objectives. Okay. We talked about, let me go back to this for a second. You guys talked about what you want to get out of this today, so just hold me to that. If there's anything else, I'm happy to add to it, but I think we had a pretty good cross-section of desired outcomes. So, I don't really need to teach, you guys should teach me what a brand is. Who wants to give a definition of a brand, or read this definition and tell me if you disagree with it or want to add to it. So, I say brand is defined as a name, a term, a sign, a symbol, or combination of all the definitions that identifies a maker or a seller of a product or service. And if you think back to the history of branding, it comes from literally like branding an animal, I think is some of the rooted history, which showed ownership, right? That steer belongs to my ranch, so I put my seal on it. And from there, it's obviously evolved into something much more than that today. I talk about branding as like having a relationship. So I have a relationship with certain brands, almost like I have with friendships, personal friendships. You know, if a brand's been true to me for years and years and years, and then they screw up, I give them a break. If I hardly know the brand and it screws up, I probably write it off. So if you think about your relationships with people, you know, your kids, I guess you always give them a break, so they always have a chance to come back. But for most brands, you'll give them 2 or 3. Like I drive an Acura, and it's just been running great. I have 115,000 miles on it. I always get it maintained, but nothing has broken on that car. So I just done my routine maintenance, and I love driving it. And so, I don't know, I might keep it for another 5 years because it's just been so reliable. So if it screwed up, something went wrong at this point, I'm like, okay, well, one time in 8 or 9 years, that's not too bad. That's much more reliable than most friendships. So, you know, so think about it that way. We're lucky if we can get 6 months with a friend not like doing something stupid. So a brand conveys a level of quality, reliability, durability, dependability, depending on its equity. So, you know, here's some of the examples of what I would think are really quality brands. Has anyone seen the latest advertising that's been out for John Deere?
No.
No? So I just saw this recently. Whenever I see a brand that I talk about, I kind of hone in on. So this is a whole thing about these people operating, people like you and me, they're operating John Deere equipment, and it's all about, did you know that such and such didn't really happen? So the first one is a guy, and he says, do you know that Vikings didn't wear horns? And then you're like, no, I didn't know that. I thought they did, and on their helmets, I thought they were horns, but okay, maybe they didn't. Then another one's a lady goes, did you know that ostriches don't really stick their heads in the sand? No, but okay. And then there's one other, and then eventually it's like, did you know that John Deere's are not really that expensive or not impossible, you know? So it's like this whole campaign of clearly they found out through their research that people think John Deere's are great, but they're just too expensive. And so they're debunking that using a whole bunch of other examples of like these kind of crazy urban, you know, tales about what is real or not real. So now pay attention, and maybe you'll see it if you even watch television. So maybe everything's consumed on your mobile phone. But you can't get away from advertisements there either, so maybe
No, it's interesting that you bring that up because I think that second definition where you have the word conveys, it's like, yes, we as the brand team want to convey a certain message, but your brand really isn't your brand is what the consumers perceive, not necessarily what you convey. And so
I agree 100%. That's a great catch.
We had a professor say that a brand is a bundle of associations, and I think that's kind of what you're saying is. a brand
Absolutely.
is-
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think my definition needs to evolve because I do agree that it's a consumer-driven world now. And it's what consumers say, it's our perceptions that drive what a brand means, not what they hope to. Now, I mean, if you, as a brand manager, want to achieve what you set out to do, then you better ensure that it instills in it exactly those attributes, and then still listen really closely to figure out why it's not doing what it's supposed to.
Right.
In the case of John Deere, my takeaway is they're doing a lot of things right, but they have this misperception out there that it's too expensive. And so I'll go with the next brand, which maybe is a Honda or a Caterpillar or something, even though nothing runs like a Deere, it's like, that's like a Rolex, and yeah, I'd like to have one, but it's just too expensive.
That's an interesting dichotomy too, because the last thing Gucci would ever want you to think of is cheap.
Yeah, yeah, they want to be outpriced.
Yeah, absolutely, we are the
Yeah.
most expensive.
So when you look at the volume versus the price graph, you know, typically the greater the volume, the more less expensive. But in some cases with brands like Gucci, actually they are trying to drive The less there is, the less volume, the more expensive. Yeah, yeah, so, yeah, it's an exclusivity thing. I don't know what a Gucci purse costs today. You know, does anyone, can you tell me?
It depends on the brand. Probably a couple, I mean,
What's the least expensive Gucci purse cost? $2,000?
yeah, I see around 2 probably,
Maybe 3?
maybe 3.
Maybe as high as 25?
Maybe like a clutch, maybe in the, right, like 2,000?
I don't know.
Yeah. Probably
It's
2,
not that
that's
big.
it, 2, right.
Yeah. So they have to worry about knockoffs, but I mean, the whole point is it's around exclusivity, right? You own a Gucci purse, it says more about you than actually the purse does for you. Brand adds value to a product. You know, when I was at Coca-Cola, we talked about if every physical asset was destroyed or burned down, that you could take, and you owned the trademark, you could take that trademark to pretty much any lending institution and borrow billions against it to rebuild everything because of the value of the brand. And I think that's what this kind of says is, if you look at 2 products and they're identical, the one that has the brand can absolutely charge more money and probably should charge more money because of all those things that it delivers. So an example of this, and you guys tell me if you think I'm off base, but who's gone into a drugstore and looked for like Excedrin, which is a type of ibuprofen, and looked right next to it to a bottle that looked almost identical, same brand colors, same ingredients, probably manufactured by the same company, you know, and said, I don't know, unless you're really poor, you know, poor student who's like, okay, I'm hoping this is exactly what this one is, because it needs to, because I can't afford to pay twice as much. But typically we'd be like, okay, let's make it even a little bit more difficult. You're a mom or a dad, you have a 12-month-old who's got a fever that's not too high, it's only about 100. And you'd rather not take them to the emergency room tonight because you've got like too many things on your plate. And you go in and you find baby Tylenol versus generic. What are you gonna buy?
Town.
I mean, this is a brand room, of course you're gonna buy Tylenol. And Tylenol's gonna cost you more.
Exactly the same.
But that's all right,
Well,
because the value proposition is higher. The return on that purchase is in the mind of the consumer is better than buying the non-branded version. Right? No?
I don't know.
I would buy the
I would actually buy the generic.
I think-
Okay.
It's just an identical product.
I think if you know, like, the basics of pharmaceuticals, like, you know they're exactly the same and there is no difference. But if you're not quite as familiar with the differences between, like, a generic and a brand for pharmaceuticals, you might buy the branded one. If you know the difference and you know that there is no difference, you're gonna buy the generic.
Yeah. So there are the percentage of the population who will definitely go after the generic. But if you're a mom who knows nothing about that, for an extra $1 or $2, are you gonna take a chance on your 12-month-old?
there always is a slight difference. It's never completely identical. There's always, instead of the, like Advil or ibuprofen, right? You have the sugar outer casing of the Advil as opposed to your generic ibuprofen, which doesn't have the casing dip, whatever you want to call it, right? So, I mean, there are slight differences. I mean, nothing's exactly the same. But, I mean, I still buy the generic.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
But
Except for
doesn't that speak
Pedialyte,
to-
you gotta go with
A
the
large
real
part of this is redefining what the truth actually means to you, what it means to publish. Like the De Beers were buying a diamond engagement ring that wasn't really a thing until 1920. And like they redefined an entire culture and what it means to get engaged. So isn't a large part of this is really taking what the message is and inventing a new truth out of it as well in order to get to the consumer?
I think that's a fair statement. I just continue to go back to the idea of value, right? If you're delivering value, and value can be determined in a whole bunch of ways. It's certainly what you pay for the product, but it's also the time you invest, and it's your sense of well-being. All of those factors, right? Yes.
I also think it's a little bit about which consumer you're talking too, because I think
Yeah.
if you talk to like millennials, they're more into private label. So I think if I grew up and I know I've taken private label NyQuil in my life and it's worked, I probably would be okay with giving that to my kid. So I think it depends on who you're talking to.
For sure, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that you guys really have good understanding of segmentation and target audience. For sure, we have to factor that in. But all I'm saying at the end of it is, like, you're trying to figure out which has more value to you. And ultimately, let's just say you work 100 hours a week, you're working on Wall Street, and you've got no time for anything other than work, but thankfully you get paid a decent salary. You might go, look, you know what? I don't have to sweat it with De Beers. I know that the diamond that I get from there is going to be what it needs to be, what they say it's going to be. I've been told this diamond broker over here is going to give me the same thing, but I don't know about inclusions or color or clarity or any of that stuff. So this one might cost me twice as much. But on a scale of value, I'm going with De Beers because I have no personal time to figure out whether or not this other one. So it doesn't have to be Tylenol, it could be some other brand, and, you know.
That's what Tiffany's does.
Yeah, there's a
with
lot of
their
value in that blue box.
Yeah, because, so I recently married, so I've been through the diamond purchasing process, and the thing I didn't realize about the Tiffany brand is that obviously it's associated with price, but it's because the diamonds that they use in their rings have to meet a certain threshold. So you know with the Tiffany brand, to your saying, you know exactly what you're getting. You're getting a diamond that is of, X, Y, and Z grade in the different categories in the terms of the 4 C's.
And I would argue that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Because for many women, I'm being sexist here, but I think generally they're targeting women. Tiffany's has a whole bunch of other benefits or attributes that really connect with them. So just the idea that you were given Tiffany's engagement ring can say a lot more than just the quality of the diamond itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Do you agree? Yeah. So I gave Ellie and her sister a Tiffany silver bracelet a couple of years ago. 16th birthday, maybe?
Yeah.
So what was that like for you? I mean, put you on the spot, but.
Well, that was a big deal for me because I've never had anything Tiffany, or think I would get anything close to Tiffany anytime soon, and so I valued it, and I thought it was at the top of choice of anything nice jewelry or whatever. So, yeah.
So it was fun to see the really pretty Tiffany blue box. And,
Yeah.
And it's cool, when you go into Tiffany's, whether you're buying the least expensive item, which
Champagne
that's
flutes,
probably
yeah,
towards the end.
Champagne flutes, $25 a piece. It's the
Oh,
best,
wow.
It's the best wedding gift in the planet.
I love it.
Big blue box.
And when you're going to answer basically what I was going to say, but
Next person to get married is getting Tiffany.
Tiffany champagne flute.
How about you,
that's a
Ryan?
pretty good gift for him. For his
I love this.
for his groomsmen. My eldest son is getting married this year. But the idea that the quality of the service, you're going to get all of that for a champagne flute, or it's not going to change whether for a champagne flute or for an engagement ring. They're going to deliver that same level of quality. So anyway, I love talking about brands, and you guys clearly know a lot about them. So we could just talk about that all day long. So here's a process that I use or I believe the companies use when they extend their brand. So the first thing is to determine brand criteria. So this is all about the brand positioning and promise. And then, so what I'll do with a company who's thinking about extending a brand is say, okay, you should conduct market research, and you should find out what consumers think your brand can get extended into. But if you're not prepared to do that right now, what we can do is we'll get a good sense, and hopefully these guys have an understanding of the brand position and promise and brand equity. is then to develop a universe of categories. So that might be through like just getting a group of folks together and doing a little brainstorming session, right? So everything's on the table, throw it out. So I did this with Entrepreneur Magazine. So we said, okay, where can your brand go? And we threw out everything from lending and legal services and business services and maybe helping them with investments, and it was just all of those things. And then once we had that, we applied the filters to produce a qualified list. And so I went back to those 5 filters that I talked about earlier, which is, does it support the brand's position, promise, brand attributes? Does the brand bring a competitive value to the category? Does the brand have any negative attributes that could hurt the extension? And does the extension have any negative attributes that could hurt the parent? And if you got through all of that, then what we said was this is a qualified list. And then from there you can look at, okay, how big are those categories? How fast are they growing? Who are the potential partners? And then you can figure out whether or not it makes sense to start to extend into those categories. So that's exactly what I just said. So once we've done that, then you look at, so that's kind of like, go back here, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but this is kind of like where to play. So where can the brand go? What's the category that you can extend into? And this is kind of how to extend. So once you've defined that first step, which is where can the brand play, what category can it go into, the second step, and that's pretty small, but I guess you guys can read it, is do we have competency in this category? So when I was at Rubbermaid, we would be like, okay, can we make this kitchen tool or gadget? Yeah, we have competency. I wouldn't say it's very high competency, but we have it. And then the question then is, okay, if we have a competency, then should we manufacture this or should we source it? So in the case of totes, for example, we'll manufacture that. We have plants, we'll run these things out, and we'll make tons of them. And we know that we can control all of that, and then we'll market and sell them ourselves. Or if it was some other category, then we might go, you know what, we want to manage the marketing and sales, but we don't want to manufacture this. We'll go source it. Get a plant in China or in Vietnam or even Alabama. Wherever we can get it, where we can get a good price, and we know that they can build all the manufacturing specs into this that meets our criteria. If you say you can't manufacture, if you don't have the competency, or I would add one more thing to it. Maybe you have the competency, but you don't have the capacity. You want the product in the marketplace. You've got 10 things that you can do next year, but you only have the capacity to do 3 of them. Then you might go, okay, well, we got to look for somebody else to do. And there's other reasons, but let's just assume that's one of them. Then you can start to go, okay, we got to go external. And the 2 choices really are, we'll buy a company who does this, and we'll let them do it for us. And we'll either keep them under their current brand, or we'll fold them into our parent brand. Or we can license our brand to that company, let them build our brand attributes into their product, let them market and sell it. Make sense? So if you choose a licensing route, then there should be a brand counsel, somebody like me or a future somebody like you. You go, okay guys, you've asked me to look at these categories. I found in this particular category 3 companies. Here they are, A, B, and C. Here's A, here's what it looks like. Here's B, here's what they look like. Here's C. I'm recommending we go with B. They're not going to pay us the highest royalty, but we know that they know how to do this better than anybody. And ultimately, our brand's way more important than the royalty revenue. And if we look at all the non-royalty revenue benefits, this is the one we want to go with. Because if we go with company B, not only will they create brand value for our own core brand, because of their relationships, they can actually bring us into channels that we're not in today. So we're going to sell more core product than we sell the extension. So things like that are what you're challenged to do, not just find somebody, of course, that's got the highest royalty revenue. And hopefully you're not measured just on that. Because then you have to go like your personal, kind of standards versus what you're going to get paid. And then you're having this dilemma. But hopefully those are aligned. And then once that happens, you go through this 8-step process, which I'll get to later, and then you issue your license, and then you just begin. That's kind of like when the marriage starts.
This is a tangential question.
Yeah,
Like,
please.
It kind of relates back to Coke, where you're like, you turned down that youth license agreement. It would have been perfect for your just like key metrics. Did you have a conversation with your manager where you're like, look, I did this because it's the right thing for the business, not myself personally. So like, I might miss my goal, or I like turned down a lot of financial compensation. Like, did you bring that up to the manager?
I think I brought it up, but I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that part about I might miss my goal, because she would have been like,
I don't care.
yeah, you better not. That's not even, like, you can't leverage this in a conversation for later, no. And thankfully, we actually drove, and I had a great team, but we ultimately delivered $3 million worth of royalty revenue that year. So I would have been thrilled with $1 million or even 1.1 million, but a couple of things went well, especially the one with the NASCAR thing. We had like a couple of small programs, and I was hoping to get 100,000 or 200,000, and then we did that Dale Earnhardt thing, and that delivered $1 million. So she was like, "Yeah, that's great, and you did that, but we're not counting that." I'm like, wait a second, you can't discount $1 million worth of royalty revenue. We still led that, but no, she would have never like let me. But we did have the conversation. I said, "Could you believe that such and such offered us such and such?" And I said, "Of course, no." And then of course you would look at them and you're like, "Okay, you better agree with that decision, right?" And of course you're like, "Oh, absolutely, that was a smart thing to do." You know, you couldn't. And she was this woman who ultimately ran Spanx for a number of years, Lori and Goldman. She was all about the money, but not in that case. Yes, sir.
How is a general manager, because you can't be involved in every deal possible at such a big company, how can you set up controls in place to make sure that something like that doesn't happen? Like you saw it with, I think, even Chevrolet, how they overpaid to be on, I think it was Man U's shirt. So how do you set up controls to make sure something like that doesn't happen?
Well, great question, and hopefully in this little chart you see some of that, right? So we had a very specific process that said, look, we're going to look at, first, what category are we even in? So we're all going to agree on what that is, and then we're going to have a conversation literally with the business units, because while I worked in the world, in like the corporate licensing department, I had a relationship, there was like a brand council, and then there was a group that I oversaw that included representatives from each of the business units that were like responsible for marketing or branding. And so we would have the conversations about, okay, which categories should we go after? And that would happen in that step too. Like, okay, we want you, even though we can do this internally, we want you to do it because we don't have the capacity this year. And then eventually you've had all the conversations in front, and then you still go back to this brand council and you like literally report everything, and you go, here's everything, here's the reason why. And sometimes after doing all that, you'd be like, we're not doing that. And you'd be like, no way. I mean, I've done all this work, I'm ready to go, I've got these guys, and by the way, I'm counting on them to deliver against my metrics, and for whatever reason, they'll stop you. So having that structure in place is really important on the front end, but also on the back end. So the biggest, most important thing once you have a license completed is having a great approval process. Because these guys, or your partners, are on the hook for minimum guaranteed royalties, and they need to sell product with your brand on it. And if you're slowing them down because you don't know what you're doing, or you're saying, well, yeah, I know we told you you could do that, but and yes, you do have all this done, but we don't want you to do it, they're probably going to sue you. Because if they're following all those guidelines that you said you're going to do, and you're holding them to a metric, and then all of a sudden you're like saying, well, we choose not to approve because our agreement says that we can make that decision, which you typically would put in an agreement, it's really, that relationship is on really kind of faulty ground. So being buttoned up, and I haven't worked at Disney, but I interviewed a few folks that do work for a book that I'm working on. It's just masters, finding great partners and then having a really efficient process. So the products that are on the shelf are phenomenal. And these companies that are with Disney, most of them have been there for years.
So is this trust or is this just really solid vetting of people that, or is it
Really
a
good
little-
lawyers. I mean,
I think it starts with the solid vetting, but ultimately it goes to trust.
Just giving it to them and saying go, right?
Yeah,
So you
eventually,
see
right? They
standard,
prove
you do it.
themselves, right?
Yeah.
Then you can, I mean, if they've done this for 7 years and they do it consistent in and out, I'm sure the conversation that you as a licensing manager are having with them are like, thank God these guys exist. This is the one I need to worry about over here. If they make a mistake, they're gonna own it and they're gonna fix it, but the likelihood of them making a mistake is pretty low. I know a company that has been a licensee of Coca-Cola for 20 years. I think they've had Caterpillar for, a long time. They picked up Ford for about 5 years. They have these long relationships, and these guys are good. They're really good at what they do, so you can feel pretty comfortable that they care about your brand as much as you do. But yeah, find those right companies first. So let's define what licensing is. Basically, licensing is, and I'm talking about brand licensing, is I own a brand and I choose to give you access to that brand in exchange for, on a certain category, in a certain region, on a certain channel, in exchange for compensation in the form of a royalty. Normally that royalty is a percentage of the revenue, the net revenue, but it could be anything. I heard, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's in the book that was written on the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, whose name is...
Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, I guess it was Colonel Sanders. I was thinking that's not right, but yeah, his name is Colonel Sanders. I think he, his first deal was like 50 cents per piece of chicken. It was on a per piece basis you got paid.
Well, I mean, so if you're doing it at the percentage bottom line, couldn't your licensees potentially use some tricky accounting methods to
Oh, it's
show-
always revenue.
Okay.
It's never gonna be bottom line. And the reason it's not bottom line is for exactly those reasons. And on top of that, they would argue, and you're happy for them to argue it, I don't want you looking at my P&L. And you're like, you're right, I don't want to look at your P&L. I want to look at your revenue. In fact, I want it to be on total revenue. And they'll be like, whoa, wait a second, you can't do total revenue. You're like, well, why not? Well, because, there's ship backs and there's, product that gets broken and, all these other reasons. Or maybe they never pay me, and ultimately you get to some definition of net revenue, which is a number, which is a definition that's really scrutinized. But yeah, that way it's real simple. What did you get? We want a percentage of that. And what you can, the way I used to think about it is, if my brand's really strong, my percentage of your net revenue should equal about half of your operating income.
Would you say that again?
My percentage of your net revenue should equal about half of your operating income. You're like, whoa, that's a lot. You want half of my operating income? Well, without my brand, you don't have any of this. So maybe it shouldn't be worth quite that, but maybe it should be worth more than that. I mean, if with a great brand, I could quintuple your sales. You're going to add maybe 1% to my top line, but I'm going to add 400% yours. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to back that up, I worked at a small toy company, and we made like an innovative
I love
toy
it.
storage like playmat, and it did okay. And then we got the Lego license, a Hot Wheels license, and a Star Wars license, and we couldn't keep them in stock. So we thought we had a horrible licensing agreement, and it's kind of true. Like our minimums were huge; they took a lot of the margin, but we just did. I think we did like 10 times the volume, so we were just like fine.
Oh, I love it when that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
It was just really, because all of a sudden you're selling a few, like 6 to mom and pop, and now we're sending containers to Toys R Us and Walmart and Target, and you're like, fine.
Yeah. You could take 70% of my operating income, and I'm still 100 times better than I was the year before. Yes, sir.
So, I'm sure we'll talk about this once we get to like the negotiation, but in terms of just overall leverage in this deal, is there ever a time where the brand does not have the upper hand in like a negotiation?
In rare instances, yes.
Okay.
especially, I mean, goes for everything that you guys probably talk about anyway, but let's say I have an up-and-coming brand that's really hot, and let's say it's in the toy category, and Hasbro or Mattel comes to me, and it's only Hasbro or Mattel, it's not both of them. I mean, they could make my little brand that's up and coming into something global. So you might go, look, you know what, I'll take a smaller royalty revenue, percentage of royalties, or I'll agree to certain criteria that I wouldn't if I were bigger, because I want that license.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's that kind of law of gross tonnage, you know.
Yeah.
But in general, the brand should always be in control on kind of just a basic kind of.
Gotcha.
But good question. I think we covered that. I love this one because this guy's still around and he's still like crushing it, and he hasn't played basketball in how many years?
This guy
Well,
is
1990,
top.
wasn't
There it is.
Wasn't he on the Wizards?
Yeah,
Wasn't he
Retired in
retired?
2006, third time.
The third
Crying
But like, when did he really retire? You know, like active play.
He left the Bulls in 90 after the 99 season.
Yeah, so I mean, that's effectively almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was funny, and here's a perfect example of how strong his brand is.
It's amazing.
So anybody, I know this is SEC, and I respect to how the Georgia, did anybody watch any ACC basketball?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So did you guys watch when Duke played Carolina?
Yes.
And what are they doing? A deal with the football team
Yeah. Well,
for the Jordan brand?
What I think is the most interesting is they
Michigan.
weren't the first team to do the first football team to have a deal with Jordan Brand.
Michigan
was,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Crazy, right? You think at least Carolina, because he's a Carolina grad.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at that and I was like,
Who's an individual
No, it's North Carolina. No, that's a Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, you
I
can
think
make the
Jim-
brand
I think
fit.
Jim came in.
It's a
Perfect,
fit.
perfect
Yeah.
fit. Jim and
But-
Jim.
That Carolina would come first. Yeah, that's exactly.
He did Space Jam.
Well,
probably Michigan did the deal just to get under Carolina's skin.
Well,
you know?
I think Michigan did the deal. It was perfect timing for them because they had Jim Harbaugh come in the same year when they signed that. So they were trying to they really wanted to rebrand their program, and that was probably, I mean, obviously anything Harbaugh can do to get his name out there to go recruit. I mean, I went to the University of San Diego, so I got to work for him, and that's just completely what that guy's all about.
Okay.
And he just.
So, see, this, talk about value, right? Because that's what we were talking about earlier, and it's way more than the money you pay. I mean, for Harbaugh, the value for this was in this nuance area, right? But that nuance area might be more powerful or have more of a weighting than any amount of royalties that they'll pay, or, you know, the cost associated with it. So I love that. I mean, that's why I love this example, and he just continues to be worth so much. So in this case, yeah, they literally, you know, like Nike said, look, we will pay you to have your brand on our shoe, and it's been the #1 shoe for ever, you know? And how many, like, you know, you talk about the term GOAT, greatest of all time, and here's LeBron who's like, I'm the GOAT, and you're like, well, we'll see, you know, I haven't played in forever, and I'm still doing deals like this.
He's the branding goat.
He's the branding GOAT, for
Yeah.
sure. And now, I mean, maybe 20 years from now,
Tiger Woods was
LeBron
very
will
good.
be the GOAT.
Tiger,
Woods was the
Tiger
GOAT.
was very good,
Until he
but
Yeah, until he just,
2000, whatever it was.
2009.
2009.
November 2009.
Yeah, that's right.
what a screw up.
I like was heartbroken because I remember watching his like address in my dorm room at DePaul my freshman year, like
It's depressing.
in November. It was really
Yeah,
depressing.
I remember too.
Because like growing up, that's who like playing golf, like that's who you idolize. And so it was just like seeing one of your childhood idols just crumble in like before you.
And he's never recovered,
Yeah, no, he's never recovered.
never recovered.
So,
And he would have passed 18
absolutely.
majors 5 years ago. Yes, sir.
So, from the licensor standpoint, it's easy with, if you're gonna put Michael Jordan on a basketball shoe, you're gonna sell him basketball shoes. So that negotiation seems pretty straightforward. But as a licensee, like, if I wanna put Iron Man on a toothbrush, how do you really evaluate the metrics of what the uptick or the lift in sales is going to be from that? And then if, like, so I know you're on the other side of the table for me usually with this, but, so if I'm trying to, like, how can you anticipate what to expect in lift? Or I guess to flip it, how would you sell me on using Iron Man on a toothbrush without any previous metrics of how that works?
I mean, if I were.
Am I asking that right?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely spot on. So I own the Iron Man, access to the Iron Man brand, and
You're Disney, of course.
yeah, and you're going to potentially be my licensee. I ask you a question, and then I hopefully can back it up with my research, but I'd say, for young boys, what is going to motivate them to brush their teeth? Is it the great Colgate toothbrush and the delicious Colgate toothpaste? Or is it going to be something that really like connects with them at their level, you know? And we can prove to you in all of this mounds of research that they love the Iron Man brand. And so if you give them anything with Iron Man on it, that is only going to excite them about the idea of brushing. And so you're going to see, especially if you have it and your major competitor does not, then mom, until she's like, can't stand it anymore, okay, I'll buy the Colgate, right? Even though I love Crest.
So how often is there that exclusivity? Because I guess as a licensor, you want your brand on as many things as possible, presuming that it's well done. So what's the general upcharge for your exclusivity?
3 times typically, but what I would say is what we did at Rubbermaid is we practiced exclusivity. I don't want you having my brand on something and then giving your direct competitor the same opportunity, because I'm setting you up for failure. And this is not about, I'm not selling you a car, this is not a one-time transaction. I'm actually entering into a long relationship with you. It's almost like a marriage. So we got to look at this 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years after and go, this works for both of us. And so while I might get more minimum guarantees, am I going to get, what I care about is my brand in that category. And so am I going to get the best, I'm going to be best service by giving my brand to a whole bunch of different folks and having them fight it out? Or if I'm just putting criteria that says, okay, you got it, Colgate, run with it. Here, we've agreed certain metrics that you're going to hit. I hope you exceed those. We're going to do everything we can to back up our brand and help you. And as long as you do, we might have the legal rights to actually license in your category, but as long as you do everything the way you're going to, we have no interest in spreading this around. But if you like change leadership, and then all of a sudden don't care about us, oh yeah, absolutely, and we're going to switch. Yes ma'am, yes sir, yes ma'am first.
Like,
Let's go.
how often, in that sort of a situation, would the toothpaste company actually be asking you to convince him, like, instead of having multiple toothpaste companies like bidding for your brand? I mean,
Yeah,
how
that
does
really
the
gets
brand
back
have
to
like convince the company that that's where the brand should
it
go?
is a bit of a dating game for sure, and I would say it depends on how high your brand is, right? Like if Iron Man's not available because somebody else got it, then you're looking at a second tier superhero. You might have to do some selling. You're like, shoot, I didn't get Iron Man.
Tier 2.
I know there's this really cool secondary hero, maybe
Stuck
they're
with
good.
Scarlett Johansson.
So that's what I would say, it's a little bit of like,
Scarlett Johansson.
how, who's my competition,
Would that
right?
appeal to the
Am I the only
The young
pretty one standing?
the 16-year-old.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask, so, Hershey came out, or is going to come out with these Reese's cups with these cookie pieces inside of them. And when they went on the Today Show, the anchor said, oh, these are so great, they have Oreo in them.
Yeah.
And they're not Oreo, they're just, off-brand, whatever, they're, Hershey and Oreo are competitors. So I was thinking, what would an arrangement look like between Oreo and Hershey if they were to do that?
Yeah.
I know in the past they have worked together.
Yeah, that happens a lot, and that's called ingredient licensing.
Yeah.
So Oreo would be the ingredient licensee. They are a great ingredient licensee for a lot of ice cream, right?
And they're-
So I always say it's like, you know, your product by itself is good, but with the ingredient, it's that much better.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not gonna do 10 times your sales, but it might give you a 15% lift. So,
Yeah, I
So
wonder
the-
if Hershey approached Oreo.
I don't know, but if I'm Oreo, I'm wanting to make it clear that Hershey doesn't have my product in there, you know. Of course, I might just keep my mouth shut on that, because ultimately, good press is, press is good press
Yeah.
regardless. So
Right.
that might give a lift in my sales of other product, even though I'm technically not in there.
Oreo also just came out with its own candy bar.
Yep, I saw
So,
that.
Yeah.
I don't know why they wanted to do business with Hershey.
So I'll be
Yeah.
curious if they actually manufactured it themselves, or they sourced it, or.
Yeah, yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
We'll let you know.
Stephen, come stop.
Please.
Stop, for God's sake. You're ruining American.
This is going so well, we're moving very slowly, but hopefully you're getting a lot of it.
Great.
It doesn't really matter.
Silos.
Tuesday night, guys.
So here's what I say about licensing. To combine together, brand licensing enables companies whose brands have a high degree of equity to extend and or expand their brand by appropriately pairing it with a product and or service. So I say that when you do this well, more great brands are in more products that people love and get to consume than they would be otherwise, right? And don't forget services, because services, especially in an economy like ours, tend to be more than the products. So if you love the Ritz brand, maybe there's a Ritz brand of, maybe massage, or, think about a service that is associated with the Ritz brand that, you're like, ooh, I didn't know they were into that, but if they're doing it, then I would love to try it, So I think services is one that doesn't get as much of a play, but that's where I was with entrepreneur, with like, okay, you're all about kind of thought leadership, you talk about coaching and you provide legal help. Why not have a group of folks who are selling those services under your brand to help you extend into those categories, which will then reinforce why they should even read your magazine more. Yeah.
So we're sort of talking about like licensing as a point of view of someone who would be setting up these relationships. Like, what if they're already set up and they're not good relationships? Like with Marvel, they were licensing out their characters to other production studios and had to try and get them back.
Mm-hmm.
Or with like Stanley, they have their name all over these things and they don't want those things anymore. What's sort of the process of getting your licenses back if they're not good for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first joined Rubbermaid, one of the primary reasons I got hired was because it was a mess. And by the way, it's funny, because they've come a long way, but the company that was running the Stanley program initially was also running the Rubbermaid program. And so they were in a whole bunch of categories that didn't make any sense. Not as bad as Stanley, but still bad. And so what we first did was we got everybody aligned and said, look, yeah, we're gonna lead this, we're the subject matter experts, but we're gonna engage with you and make sure you're all aligned with what we're doing. And by the way, what was going on there was the division leaders, to get deals done, were going, oh yeah, I have the consumer category, I know you want something in this commercial category, yeah, you can have it. And then the commercial division president was going ballistic, going, what the, you can't give away my category, I don't want a category, my brand sold on this category. So we got all that aligned first, and then we looked at what was our brand's position, what did we stand for, and that wasn't really well defined, so we had to get that sorted, and we said we're about storage and organization in order to help moms be in control. So then we looked at all of the categories we were currently in, and like half of them didn't support that brand position. Now you can't just ditch them, right? But what you can do is go, okay, while we're in these categories until this expires, and when it expires, we'll let it expire, we're gonna make sure at least the brand standards are being met, which a lot of them was like, okay, where's the approval for that? Well, I think it's in some drawer somewhere. So we upped the quality of the approval process. And then what we started doing was every time they asked us for something, we put some more requirements in. okay, you wanna add in this category, you wanna add in this channel, or you want this region, then you have to agree to this. And so it was like a fair for fair exchange, and we basically just elevated the standards, knowing that there were certain categories that we were gonna stay in, and then the other ones we were eventually gonna just peel off. In the meantime, I was looking at new categories that reinforce that position. Okay, so let's go through all the different examples of licensing. So we've been talking a lot about corporate licensing, because a lot of us are going into corporate brands. So you got John Deere and M&M's, Coca-Cola, but it could be Hershey, or it could be Acuity Brands, or whomever. Of course, we always talk about Disney, so Homer Simpson is like #1 show for 25 years or something crazy. And Hello Kitty, which I actually interviewed a guy that worked at Mattel, and I was like, how does this work with Hello Kitty? Like, they don't even have,
Hanrio, they don't make it.
they don't make anything, and they don't have a story to speak of. The story's been created from the licensees. And story is a huge part of any brand, right? So this has been a funny one, and he had some thoughts about it, but it's like, this is kind of a little bit of an oddball. I mean, it's a huge, huge licensing program. In fact, I screwed up royally, and I'll own up to it. I don't know if you know what I'm gonna talk about, but my wife, I think we've been married like 2 years. It's like, what do you want for Christmas? Well, you know, this and this that she'll tell me. And one of them was pajamas. So I bought her some Hello Kitty pajamas because there were like adults wearing them. And she was just like, are you kidding me? She made me look, do you remember that? She talked about it? Maybe, no. Anyway, so she never wore. I think ultimately she took them back. But like they have a huge adult.
Here's a snack.
Yeah, well that would have been fine. I think I bought them at like Nordstrom's. I mean, I could buy them at a big time department store. So yeah, so some adult women might have thought that was a nice gift, right?
There we go.
Not my wife. Clearly didn't understand her brand preference. So you got that. Fashion. It's funny, you know, like these sports brands are now fashion brands, right? Under Armour, Lululemon, huge example.
My favorite.
Do you guys like Lululemon? Yeah. So here, 18 years old, like Lululemon.
Up to like 80, they're wearing it. Everyone's
I don't
wearing
even
it.
know
I'm
what
like,
it is.
just if you're wearing it, it's okay in the gym, but please don't like wear those if you're not actually exercising.
I agree. They've created the athleisure.
Yoga
pants, you don't have to wear category.
Interestingly enough, they're black.
Activewear.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my activewear while I'm on the couch
Every
eating
single
my ice
private school I
cream.
worked at,
Really?
because they,
All right, I won't go there. I teach a marketing class and I was harassing my students about that. They all wear activewear all the time. So technology licensing, but technology also goes back to your examples before Procter
kindergarten
&
all the way
Gamble,
up to
big time into
$25
technology, this guy with
Everyone-
this golf club.
These are-
Art, Thomas Kincaid, you know, you name it. There's two categories. This one, art and music, I just don't even go
Well,
near.
Sotheby's has a real estate firm now.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good extension, right? Those are all
Phenomenal
licensed out,
extension.
so-
Yeah, they've legitimately extended into that category, and they did it over time, and it just made sense eventually. Just like, very different, but Meredith owns the Better Homes and Garden brand. That is a phenomenally large real estate brand today. It's in the billions. So it makes them the #2 branded licensed category or licensed brand behind Disney.
Wow.
Better Homes and Garden,
I've never.
I
real
did not
estate.
know that.
You should Google it.
Better help.
Better Homes and Garden.
Well, also their seal of approval, that's not a license, is it, when they put their logo on products?
It's probably,
Yeah.
it probably is, because lots of times the way seal of approval works is there'll be a list, like a JD Powers list, but if you want to use their brand on your
You
product,
have to pay them.
then you have to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they get a royalty for that.
Is
You
this
might-
sorry.
No, good. Oh, you're,
Well, no, is it kind of like Southern Living, house plans?
uh-huh.
Or is the same kind of?
Yeah, so that's a magazine, right, Southern Living? And just like Entrepreneur, they've said, look, you know, we can extend, and in fact, if you're a publisher, you want to do this as quickly as possible, right? Because you're in a dying industry, but your brand's worth a lot. And there's a lot of, what's the name of the big publishing house that has a whole bunch of magazines? Condé Nast. Condé Nast has like a huge licensing program, huge. I mean, Parents, I think, is maybe in there, and just like really smart. These are brand managers who are like, these magazines are brands, and we can connect and extend and create the brand, extend the brand experience. So music, again, is kind of a crazy one, you know, because, and I heard a guy speak about a month ago in New York, who was in the music industry, and really interesting business. But you know, you got the lyricist, you got the original, you know, music, you got the original production of that music, and then, you know, it just goes on and on from there. So you might be able to play a cover song in a concert, that doesn't cost you anything, but if you want to reproduce it, then you've got to pay everybody, you know. So it's really, really complicated. But music, we say, and I've heard this, music sells everything but itself. So the world is, in fact, he was doing a lot of music licensing. So what do I mean by that? Back 20 years ago, before Napster, artists could make a ton of money selling music. Now it's almost a given away, right? You get Spotify or any one of those platforms, they're getting very, very little. So the core way that they make money, other than licensing, is to go on tour. So that's great until it's not great, right? When you've, I don't know, given however many concerts and you're paying the staff of, I don't know, 30 people to get you around. So you know, it's really important for them to be smart about their brand and how to extend it to different license categories. So like a brand like U2, which has been around for, I don't know, 30 plus years, phenomenally large probably in licensing. Because they mean so much, right? That brand means way more than music. So as brand managers, this is a great place to be, because the whole idea of, in fact, I'm going to talk on Tuesday to a group of licensors about this whole idea of building universes. And I kick it off with, who here is familiar with the Halo brand?
The video game?
Yeah, the video game.
Oh, yeah.
I noticed, did any women raise their hand?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great that you guys know. Because it's predominantly male, right? But yeah, they've done a phenomenal job with their brand. Did you guys raise your hand? Okay. But you know, so the way that, just a little bit as a tangent, the way that Halo measures their success is not in how many games so they're part of Microsoft, by the way, so Xbox and all that. But they don't measure in the number of games they sell or units they sell. They measure in the amount of engagement time. So now you can compete like with other people, so a lot of it's online, and they're measuring how many minutes or hours a day you're spending on this. And they have these huge competitions where you can literally be like the '1 person in the world, and you eventually become like a celebrity in the sport.
Esports.
Esports.
I have a cousin that works for the #1 esports company. They're owned by Tencent. I don't know if you're familiar with Tencent, but they're the parent company of Riot Games.
Okay.
And they produce the game League of Legends, and that's the #1 game right now.
Yeah, in fact, there was a guy who talked about that. He was part of the it's a partnership between two different platforms.
Yeah, I think it's like MLG.
MLG, Major League Gaming.
Major League Gaming and,
Yeah.
and Riot, and they put on tournaments across the country.
Yeah, 15,000 people show up to these tournaments.
The World Championships was at the Staples Center in LA 2 years ago.
To watch someone else play video
To watch
someone
10 guys 5-on-5 play video games.
I mean, clearly it's not a world that I live in, but these guys are like celebrities, these gamers that are winning.
In Korea, they fill stadiums. They'll fill up like a Sanford Stadium. Not Sanford, but like let's say like the
Maybe
Georgia
North
Dome.
Carolina.
Georgia Dome, yeah, they'll fill up the Georgia Dome, and they'll put.
We'll probably see it skyrocket before we move on.
We'll finish this and we'll take a break, because I think it's probably a good time to do that. So,
I love the gift.
this is around, celebrity. Celebrities, I mean, put in whomever your favorite. The fact that J-Lo is still around and still huge is quite remarkable. But Oprah is multi-billion-dollar celebrity brand.
One thing I didn't
Kathy
realize,
Ireland, kind of a celebrity. Yes.
what I didn't realize is, the military also has its own brand license agreements. Have you ever seen these old military 1970s jackets, like the 101st Airborne Division logo on it? I don't know where all that money goes. Having served in the military, I don't know. Does it go to a secret black slush fund? Because the Pentagon will license out. It's like, and they're very litigious. Because I talked to a guy who got interviewed and was doing a reality show, and he showed up with his uniform on. They made him take off all his patches because he said that the military is very litigious about their brand awareness. Because you have to pay it. Like Michael Bay pays the military millions of dollars to be able to use its stuff, and the Transformers movie alone made the military millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I thought it was public
No.
domain.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. The military, I thought so too.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when this guy told me that, I did some digging. I had no idea that the Pentagon has a humongous licensing wing, where all they do is.
Actually, I tried to pitch. I actually didn't try to pitch. I pitched to be the agency of record for the Army. Because I hurt my knee at the Naval Academy, I actually have a disability, so I'm a disabled veteran of small business. And so they were putting their license up for bid, and it's so difficult dealing with the government. They won't give you all the information you need. And I'm a former, like 20 years with active and reserves. So we put in, and it was supposed to be due on, let's just say March the 1st, 2014 or something. All of a sudden we learned, we get it in on time, and we learned that about 2 weeks later they've extended the deadline to April 1st.
I was a defense contractor.
Yeah. So you feel my pain. What's the name of the War Dogs? You guys seen the movie War Dogs?
Yes.
He was weapons in
That's what-
NWS though.
That's with Jonah Hill, right?
Jonah Hill, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you like Jonah Hill, watch it. You hate him by the time the movie's over.
I was in the
He's
Air
such a
Force
jerk.
though, and at that point I remember watching Transformers, and it was an Air Force recruiting advertisement. Because it was
All those patches,
all
those
the-
are actual patches. That's why they make so much money off
Yeah,
it.
the authenticity of it,
They
right?
made so much
All,
money.
all the extras were airmen.
Yeah, it was.
I just-
Yeah,
The
and Michael
extras
Bay
were all
stands
airmen.
for pay. The Army will actually rent you tanks. Like if you want to use tanks for your movie, you pay the military a certain amount, and like you said, it's in their contract that they have to prove it. So some general is getting paid to watch your movie first and go, "This doesn't make us look like assholes."
Yeah, this is not any different than the chief marketing officer at Coke going, I want extra money to spend, I want a slush fund. For them, it's the same thing. So anyway, ultimately, I get this rejection letter like 3 months later and learned that the incumbent won the business, who had gotten an extension, but the incumbent was actually, I thought was getting kicked out because one of their licensees had taken one of the Army's major logos. It was for their infantry, one of the infantry groups. And without telling the general that was in charge of that unit, they had created a whole line of branded merchandise, and he was like, "Over my dead body, are we going to put this on?" And so the licensee was suing the Army, which meant that the licensing agent was caught in the middle, and so I thought they were getting thrown out.
I think it was the 82nd Airborne Division. I think I know what you're talking about. The All-American.
The All-American.
Yeah, the All-American. Yeah, because I remember there was a clothing line too. That was yes, I remember that story.
Yes. So then I was just I was like, you gotta be kidding me, because I know that my price was less, and I'm disabled. First of all, I'm a vet. I'm disabled. Yeah, and it wasn't a set aside. So, but I'm like, okay, here's all the reasons why you should have chose me, and you chose these guys, and I know what they've charged you. It was way more. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put up my hand and say, I want you to evaluate this. And then they were like scrambling, and then they're like, well, if we give you the answer to why we did this, will you not make it a formal complaint? And I had just started this, so I was like, I don't really want to rock the boat too much. So I agreed to that. Then I'm waiting, and keep asking. Eventually, about a year later, they wrote me and said, well, because we followed the directions and the rules and we decided, it was like, they like dissed me. So it's just really just but yes, the Army gets paid off. They had like 163 licensees, which to me, as an expert, means that somebody who was running that program was completely screwed up. Because there's no reason you should have 163 licensees. There's just not that many. If you're smart, you get 10 great licensees to do all of that.
Government's inefficient.
Yeah, so it just, the fact that I didn't get it was probably the biggest blessing, because it would have just destroyed me and my company. So sports, huge, right? I've worked on a lot of Olympics, but any of these, I interviewed a woman the other day who worked on the NFL in London. She was telling me about all that experience. And at the time, it's kind of a cool story. She was like, we didn't sell any real merchandise in Europe or in England. So the only time that these folks could get any NFL merchandise was when the NFL played in London, and it was a really narrow window of time. So they would come in and just literally buy the droves and buy like hundreds of pounds of merchandise. And they sold like, I don't know, a couple $100,000 in like 2 hours. But that was like a terrible experience for everybody. The brand, the consumer. So now I guess they're doing some online, and they still sell on droves, but they made the experience much better because it was just a horrible thing. So sports is a huge piece of it. So that's kind of all of it. Yes, sir.
Going into the sports example, do you think the NCAA will ever allow its players to license out their livelihood or livelihoods?
I think it's a question of time. Probably it will happen.
Like
They're fighting it, but it's going to probably happen, I would think.
Like the balls are really doing well with that. Like the UCLA family, like the dad has already trademarked all 3 players, has a brand that's based on the 3 players, and
Big baller.
so it's the big loophole because it's not the players doing it, it's their dad.
That's funny, yeah.
Johnny Manziel did trademark Johnny Football, like they're able to do all of that. So
I think it's just a question of time. It'll be like 20 years from now, it'll be like, hey, can you believe they used to not allow these guys to do
Was
this?
it
How much
Gurley
money
got
do you
like
think is being
a
left on the
suspension
table?
for the jerseys?
A lot.
Matt, how many games did Gurley miss for the jerseys?
Oh, they came down on him hard, right?
Half the season. Yeah, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, so it didn't make much sense. All right, I think we should take it's 10 after 2, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at 20 after? Oh, man.
I'm old, man.
All right, ladies, what are you gonna do?
It's all it is. It's like, it's all it is. Because you have tenant farmers going and shit. Star Wars, branding.
I'm like, I can't say that.
I feel like I can't run over my
Probably be here.
To this.
I pretty much, this is my
The way it's going.
Oh, I
love that.
I've never seen anybody here. Make it ready.
Really just So, do you want?
You always read stories about all the money. About this though, that
Yeah.
way up, there's stories about life during when it came after. It's literally one of the reasons why some of you get the military license, right? They have to have advice, there is no job in Canada, but that dude's on
I
set.
mean, I would say if you were like, no, we're
There's a guy
going
named
to
Captain Dale Dye, he was Marine guy, he used to do that.
Oh, I know that name.
He's been in every single, I knew him, he was now fresh, he used to do that job.
I think you should go.
We would go watch that like live.
Then you got
And
attacked.
then it got happy, because I mean,
Where do you want to walk?
anything with this whole subworld.
Yeah, it's
Michael
coming
Bay
out.
is best known for.
I don't think we're far.
Spend millions. Military
And probably this is a good
like
part.
Indiana Jones in the
So just text me.
the last Indiana Jones movie. There was infantry mechanized unit at Fort Bliss, Texas that they
So
sent
I would
to
just
be
say,
extras in the movie. All the Soviet soldiers at the beginning
I'm
of the
sure
movie,
I'll be
you got
here.
their those were all US
If
Army
you're going to
soldiers.
be much later than 3:30,
Yeah, and
that's
it's
fine.
an entire platoon of guys
It's
out
fine
there.
if you're past 4, honestly.
Yeah, compared to Soviet soldiers. You rent it out between the soldiers. Yeah.
thinking about
Great story, Jeff. No, I knew I knew a guy that did that. He was an SAS student, he was English, and then came out and was like, I want to get into Hollywood. And went out and pitched himself as a consultant on NCIS for, God, I can't even remember.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll need it on the way back.
No, he was behind the scenes consultant. So then Pixar called him up and was like, can you take a look at their new Cars 2? They're like, can you take a look at this for us? Because they were doing Spy
Oh, I'm
Cars,
just
right?
wondering the recording.
And he was like, sure, whatever. And he went up and just, and he's like, can I just hang out with you guys for a day? And they're like, yeah, sure. So he went to Pixar and kind of like punched up the character a little bit, and then went back down. And then a couple of weeks later, he gets a phone call.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, hey, this is Bob Iger. And he's like, hey, how can I help you, Bob? He's like, you worked on a movie.
I'm not
He's like, yeah. He's like, we had paid. He's like, no. Why'd you do it? He's like, I wanted to meet you. I guess we're cool, right?
Because
He's like, yeah, we got kids.
is,
He's like,
yeah,
yeah, two little girls.
unfortunate brains.
Oh, thanks for your help. And then 3 days later, a fucking Brinks truck full of Disney swag, like backed up into his driveway, just dumped out, like a dump truck, just all this Disney shit. Right? And he got lifetime passes for him and his daughters to Disneyland, LA, and it's just Kevin Cresswell. Excuse me. Kid. But that was that's always been kind of one of my secret dream jobs.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great day.
Like military film. I noticed that she was
You don't have a license of it. You don't have a license. That's the then, you know, everybody's helping each other. You should have time just in, so, yeah, okay. I didn't even know that Jesus church about it.
Neither, I didn't either,
But I don't
it's a
know.
good
how you
extension.
use space. You might hold the buyer and go,
That's actually a very good extension.
They've said we can have
Because
it.
they cater a lot of offices.
Yeah, it's, yeah, Twitter's email. It's like, yes.
Towards us.
I'll be right back.
Well, I was kidding, but I actually did it. Oh.
Those sent us over the edge. That was, I have a tendency to do that when I'm out with people. Yeah, she had a blast.
But you're right,
Who left?
I'm sure too with that finance.
Yeah, when everyone went to the bar and we left, we went home. This is hysterical. So, release a and I'm trying to order a Papa John's pizza in the car. And then I put in my credit card information and everything in the app, and it's like, your pizza, you know, the store is closed. You complete your order, but you know, delivery will happen at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. I was like, that doesn't really good. So, I did.
Yeah? Well, what happened?
Just like, I woke up thinking Caitlin's gonna want this shit, right? Like, if I wanted my life,
That was my point of return.
and
That's
then,
why I'm glad I didn't. I think once people were going out and just like see the place afterwards.
so it's like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
My God.
Oh, well, today I want to be here with us.
No, I'm glad I didn't like that.
I'm like, what the hell? I just started eating my dogs.
I got terrified as I walked out.
What's that? Oh, you're like,
Yeah, you remember making out like that?
she's fine.
I don't know. You know what? I make out with so many.
I know, I have that problem too.
Awesome. Pictures?
No.
I was wondering how first girl like comes in.
I just love the salt. That's not it. Sea salt. Oh, so delicious.
Me and Steven both.
Don't worry about it. The terrifying stuff. This is still on.
No, I'm just finding it.
digital
If they work together, it's
Great ideas.
So they have the London together.
What? Not with us? She did.
Together.
Why did you do that? I know.
Really? You guys don't make it out.
I'm sure that you
I know Gerard, an operations guy, I think that was awesome. Especially if you're here in town. And yeah, I don't think you have a problem here in town. Yeah.
It'd be like an Alice.
Yeah, I
Do it on like a Friday.
You shouldn't have a problem getting interested in
We
that.
only do this once a year.
When you guys have class
We'll only do
Tuesdays?
it twice.
So class?
No, see, now we're getting to the point where some people have electives that they do. For me personally, most people only have classes on Tuesday.
I caught myself.
We're doing something on like a Thursday.
You guys were sitting
So we-
I did not.
you know what I mean? Not to the point where
Brandon
it's like,
confirmed that I did.
you don't feel like
My knee is sore.
so late.
Yeah.
But then like,
ever close my
still usually.
Depending on Thursday, I'm gonna be able to do, because I work a lot of Thursday afternoons. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not gonna have the access to the seats you need.
Which Carmen's got a gift.
Carmen, why you always messing with that? It would have to be all day. I made my cookie right. I might pinky ring it wrong.
It's cool, like, you don't really grab them.
I know.
We only have 71 more slides to go.
But it's also, we talk a little bit about like, hear from like, people.
I didn't know you was
It's something I bet would be really, I didn't know so many, that's some small, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. See, a lot of it's mostly international. Like, they
Ajax is one of my favorite puns though for a brand.
popular.
Yeah, it's like Ajax is like tough on ice. Yeah. It's like a reference to like the Greek. Ajax.
Is it? I didn't know
It's
that.
really corporate
I'm
house.
gonna go watch today. The military thing. I didn't know that.
But what's funny is they're like, we're going to go for the budget's $529 billion.
But where they're gonna place us?
Right, you're like 10 billion of it.
No, it's like, we were talking to Tim about this. It's like when I get kicked off an airplane in Somalia with suitcases full of cash, the COE,
It's all about,
the licensing agreement.
Yeah.
I don't want to put that line item in the budget.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Well, I'm excited because USA goes in that area.
I mean, I was my favorite, as we walked into the hotel interview room, coming over with the line, he was like, and you were like, oh my god, you were trying to get it. Oh, that was so funny.
That's pretty good.
I'm really happy with that. That's a great game. And I don't want you to forget that JD and I paid way for you. So, there's 10%.
No way.
10%.
I've been this side is awesome. The execution.
Well, that 10% of something is still something. So. Oh, all right. I'll try and pay my lease with that. Oh man, and then the perks with that, like you know, you're gonna talk about the car because you have a full-time gig. This my 1992 Mercury Sable. Your 94 Tempo with the green body and the blue on the driver's side, which was my first car. Or Tempo that had was two-toned. I had a 92 Pathfinder with ACS rating. But I didn't know. They're like, why am I so tired? That's great. Man, And I mean, plus that environment there.
Well, I mean, I'd like to say it's like,
Let me know. Tell me when you know what brand you're gonna work
I
on.
would
I'm curious to know.
like he's in
How's it structured? Is it like you get a class or TVs or?
I've also been kind of vague.
Oh, very good. So, like the thing in the lobby area, definitely breakout. That was a lot of fun. Opening up that AMG engine, all the individual screws. Like,
I'll do it too. Yeah, that's very good. Yes. And, we should just get you guys signed
I
up.
love to see Mercedes do it. Like 15 or 20
So you should.
buyers.
Oh my God, that's the river.
Somebody copied it or whatever.
No, they'll arrest you.
Wouldn't that be fun too? See if there's like
I've seen people get like ticketed on the river or like they'll have cops, because usually there's like a get on. There's multiple
nice.
companies that you can buy tickets.
well, that was
Get in
one.
there and then get out at their matching location.
What we didn't win.
And then drive you back out.
That's what we didn't win.
They'll have cops get off the river and.
But where is it?
There.
So we actually do get to do that though, by the way.
I don't know. I'm not
But
gonna
like literally everyone is
I'm kind of in my opinion twice about it now.
Abby forgot to
pretend to be normal.
I'm going because I've been kind of guilted into it. But
I think we need that. I don't know what the but I'm sure.
Well, no, I love her because she gave me the job.
Like these sorts of events
Wow, before the time.
I'm really happy about getting it.
Theos has colors and
I mean, you're like.
and then the ones that try to get some opinions up a little bit, you might realize like, hey, they're not this kind of interesting. I know it's would affect me.
Tell me what they're gonna want. Great restaurant.
The river feed is like, some of it's okay. The river walk is very giving, like very touristy.
Yeah.
It's worth going.
They have their parades.
They have a place, that you go and you leave, they'll put a hat on you and it's.
That's changed.
Yeah, where they insult you.
Yeah. I've not done well in the movies.
Yeah, they like.
I went to Vegas once and I'll never go again.
I get punchy.
Like, I don't like it.
You got punched?
No, I get punchy.
The best food you're gonna find is gonna be like, but a lot of
You don't have to tell me.
the problem there too is like
We're gonna ball. Well, you're fighting a good fight. Next to my racing cup. I'm gonna call you Carmen. Give me some advice. What do you think about that? Seriously, because I think you're a subject matter expert, and I really appreciate you giving me these tips.
you know what I mean, like an opposite. You know, last year we went on a trip and a couple of GPS
Those guys, and we.
GPS guys don't even show up.
Well, you quit.
But I didn't know when it was over.
So then you don't do it for yourself.
I didn't know.
Ops, I mean, that are actually 20 people who are like that's why I'm just so many just here in town, there's so many different manufacturers. Caterpillar and Carrier.
process that starts with and then, look at their finances, look at their legal, not really want to know. These guys not only
Or even
understand the
it
legal
doesn't
as much
work
as you do,
because they make all their dough in the house.
but they also are extremely well
I
done.
don't know, like just even for like a small organization,
You don't want them to look to become profitable.
like a 1 hour
Because
tour
then they're going to lean on you
on Friday.
benefit to them, just as they are benefit to you, but they're always strong. Oh, no, listen, guys, we're gonna start up. I really love talking to, graduate students, because this is fun. You guys get this, you're coming with great examples. I do a lot of this with undergrads, and they like it. Like even my daughter and her friend we're really enjoying it. In fact, Ellie, who's got this finance academy, which is like a little MBA program, she's like, I'm really benefiting because at least I had some knowledge. But even Olivia was like, this is really fascinating. But they don't have any kind of basis for the conversation. So all I'm saying is I'm really loving this dialogue. We're moving slower than the slides would normally go, but the conversations are much richer and deeper. So don't worry, we're covering everything. Also, you guys can have this copy. It's Justin, right? Austin, sorry. Austin, you're Justin. Austin asked about, is there anywhere to get more information on this? So this is my passion, and I'm about 90% through co-writing a book on brand growth through licensing. It's called Lasso the World. I think I'm going to maybe change. We've created a Lasso model, so it might become the Lasso growth model. But the whole premise of this is I just have a lot of fun doing this. So one of the things I've done is I've developed a whole platform of tools. And so if you go to literally PeteCanalichio.com, you can sign up, and there's 3 tiers. The first is completely free, and there's a ton of information there. And then we'll start a dialogue. And at some point, if it makes sense for you to go to the next tier, we can talk about that too, because I'm about educating, so I don't want to hit somebody who's in school. But if you're in a company and that makes sense for the company, then obviously I would love to do that. But I want to, for those of you who want to continue this conversation, I want to be able to do that with you, but in a really meaningful way. And so there'll be a ton of resources there for you, all about how does this work, and really getting into, for me, it's all about the examples, right? Be able to talk about what these companies do. And I know a lot of them, but a lot of them I didn't know, and that's where I spent a lot of time talking to, 3 dozen senior managers. Like I talked to the guy, Mark Peevers, who was the first guy at Fox pitching Star Wars in 1976. Wow. How cool was that, right? Yeah. So, and so it's kind of fun to all the way follow it through to Rogue One now, where now Disney owns Disney owns it, right? And they spent $4 billion on this, and people were like, that's an insane amount of money. It's not worth that. No, if you're Disney, it's worth 10 times that, and they were so smart to get it for $4 billion. And Marvel the same. So, and you guys talk about Marvel, but, so anyway, I share that with you. I have cards if you want them, but it's mostly just to keep the conversation going, if you want to do that. So, a lot of this is, you guys know this already, but just to reinforce it, and I'll keep going, but it all starts with brand positioning. Everything in branding does, as you know. So there's no exception for this, and it's, the conversation I'm going to have on Tuesday is about building these brand universes, and to me it's all about pulling in the resources wherever they can come from, but making sure that you really understand as the steward of that brand what your position is, and then make sure everything flows around it, right, and that your consumers are engaged. So the reason this is in here is because a lot of licensing departments, they're off here on this other side. They're a lot of times lawyers are driving this because of trademark protection. And so it's like, no, guys, we're all on this together. We need to talk to each other continuously, and we need to figure out how do we deliver the best value to our consumers, and that means using all the resources we have. you what positioning is. But, you know, it's all about that distinctive place in the mind of the consumer. So this was the example I was telling you about with P&G. And the cool thing, and the question was asked, tell me your name again? No. So Noah was asking about, you know, this whole relationship between the brand owner and the licensees, and when you were licensing the Lego brand, they were like, yeah, you can have our brand, but don't even touch our shelf space. You know, like, okay, that doesn't feel like very collaborative. And I think it's got to go away from that to more of a, you know, we're all in this together, and we're going to help you as much as we can figure out how you get shelf space, because you're extending our brand in this category, and that's important to us. But what I loved about this example is they're all together, right? The core product is the cleaning solution, but all of the SKUs are nicely packaged, and that's a beautiful display, taking up tons of shelf space, right? What a great brand message. You don't even need to like Mr. Clean, but you walk up by that, you're not gonna be able to miss it. It's probably gonna turn your head. So really well done. And I think 4 or 5 different companies, all involved under the leadership of a kind of a licensing agency, making sure they're working very closely with the parent brand. So some of the benefits, and the more I think about this, and the more I talk about this and teach about this, the more I find there's more benefits than I even thought there was. But what happens, and the conversation is just starting to change, which is crazy, it's taken this long, but almost everybody that's a brand licensor or owner of a brand always goes to, well, how much royalty revenue is it going to bring? And you're like, okay, everything else in the marketing mix, you pay for it. And there's so many benefits of this, you should consider doing this if it brings in no royalty revenue. Because the fact that you can get into a new channel or a new region, or bring in a brand, a component of your brand that is actually superior to what you're doing yourself to help move your measurement, equity measurement, that's worth so much. That might actually drive your core brand 3% next year, which could be $100 million, right? So why the yardstick has always been, this royalty revenue, thankfully it's starting to come down, but most people, that's the first thing they go to. So, it's extending, as I mentioned, into new categories, new channels. It's about getting products to the marketplace more quickly, because if these guys are really good at what they're doing, and you have to build a discipline in that, they're ready to go, and if you sign a deal, maybe in a year. Whereas if you have to learn how to do this, that could be years before you even get the competency to do it. So much faster to market, much less risk. And I'll repeat that, much less risk, because if you're doing this right, you're not going to put the product in the marketplace without protecting your brand first. So the brand risk should be no different than if you were doing it yourself. So the risk that I'm talking about is the cost to actually go to market, because you're not having to spend it, somebody else is spending it. They believe in your brand enough to spend those resources to do this. Your job is to make sure that they understand your brand well enough that you can ensure that they incorporate the brand attributes into it, and that the product is approved and tested and ready to go to market. I mean, things like growing the total audience. I love the idea of getting into a new region or getting into a new channel. I mean, I've been trying, I know with Coke, they love that they can get into a new channel, because for the longest time it was the grocery aisle only, right? And then they started figuring out, well, what about, and now this is a dying channel, but office retail. When office retail was big, they were like, we could be at the checkout counter. I mean, that's okay, you've just walked around the store 5 times, you're ready to drink something. And
I always thought that was weird. I always did. Why are they selling sodas at Staples?
Because it's about occasions.
Yeah.
It's about occasion-based marketing, right?
Single serve and bottles.
Time utility impulse.
By the way, the ready-to-drink market, the margins are so much higher than the, what do they call it, the aftermarket, whatever, the delayed market. So that's one of the other things, but there's just here's one. I license a company, they have phenomenal technology that has nothing to do with their product. It has to do with the process, the way that they actually develop products. I could actually spend time with them, my company could, and we could learn, as long as it's not proprietary in the sense that they are protecting it, there's a good chance that you could go in there and learn that process and apply it to your own business. That has nothing to do with the product that you're licensing. That's just how it happens to do with partnering with a company that's phenomenally well run. And that might be worth more than 10 other deals. We had an example, when I licensed Rubbermaid in garden dumping carts, we at the time were selling a wheelbarrow. So, one wheel, unstable. This was a garden dumping cart, and I think you'll actually see it later. 4 wheels and ball bearings. So it was easy to pull, carried a ton of weight, had a technology where you could use 2 fingers to lift a lever that shifted one axle to the middle, create a natural fulcrum so that it just tipped right where you wanted it versus like trying to get it over here, but it wants to go over here. So like the hole's there, I pull the cart, I lift this, that comes up, it pours right there. The thing that we were concerned about was the plastic was really thin, and so we were like, oh, it's gonna be inferior to ours is like, they actually did the testing, it was superior. So it was lighter and more durable or stronger. So it's just, do you think that helped our brand equity, Consumer engagement, they loved it. We sold like 45,000 units in the first year. So that company made a ton of revenue and we made a ton of royalty revenue. And like all the senior management, leadership was like, I want one of those because I want it at home in my house and I want to pay for it. Yes, sir.
With some of these, couldn't you license them just to try them out and then just straight up acquire them? Isn't that maybe part of the play?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is exactly right. You want to get into a category, you know that the risk of buying and integrating is really high. The likelihood is very low. License the category, see if it's going to work. And then, by the way, you've worked with this company 3 years, you've figured out how to work together, acquire them then. You might even pay a little bit more, but the success rate of being integrated is going to go up infinitely. I love that example.
And then the other part of that, I guess I'm going through the 3 different stages if I want to enter a new market, right? You can license, acquire, or do it yourself. What's the concern of big guy all of a sudden coming after me? Or like, that's kind of a risk, right? If I'm showing them how to do everything, what if they just decide I'm just going to go do it myself? Aren't you kind of opening up your books? You're opening up, not your books, but your technology, everything else. Someone else can just say, oh, well, we can just go do that ourselves, and they do.
They can, for sure they can, and that is a risk. You ultimately, at the end of the day, have to look at, are we gonna grow 10 times what we were before? Are we in a category that's uniquely different enough that they won't circumvent us if we do a great job? Or if they decide to buy us as an equity owner in the company, I can live with that, and go do something else or do nothing.
Right.
So I do think it absolutely is a risk, but it's kind of one of those, maybe if you do a good job, it's a good problem to have. If you don't do a good job and you're not willing to do a great job, then they might figure out, okay, it is probably better for us to do it ourselves. And you could have spent a fair amount of time going into a category that ultimately they jerk out from under you. So there is absolutely, from the licensee side, there's absolutely that risk.
Yeah.
Which is getting to the next slide, which is about the licensee benefits. I didn't talk about the risks, but that is definitely one of them. So, it's access to that instant credibility and authenticity and all the great things that are associated with the brand that consumers love in the category that you hope to be in, right? Also, there's like other things like, in the case of Rubbermaid, we were a huge purchaser of resin. And so we could just add to our resin purchase on behalf of our partners and give them the price that we got. That might be worth more than all the minimums that they were getting ready to pay. So again, where you're working together, these are the things that are like not even into consideration that could be worth more than the whole deal itself. How do best-in-class licensing programs operate? So here's the process that I follow, which we talked a little bit about before, but we'll just go through quickly. Identify where to play, so what categories should you be in? How to win, is this something you do or somebody else does? Sorry. Then it's, okay, if you decide to go the licensing route, then you prospect licensees. This is really important, you know, and so where do you find them? You go to trade shows, you walk the floor, lots of companies are there that you've never heard of with great new technology. Maybe they've got a great presence in a foreign market where your brand could go, or they're ready to, you know, they just came into this market, but you find these really cool companies there. You can literally do store walks, and you're literally looking at categories and you're taking the product off the shelf and turning it around and going, okay, who manufactured this? I love this product. It's very similar to what I want. I wonder if they can make this, or they do make this. You know, the internet obviously is a great place to go shopping for categories of new companies. So wherever it is, you want to get, I always looked and try to say, okay, who are the top 10 in this category? You know, and which of them have brands and which of them don't have brands? The ones that don't have brands may be more inclined to work with me, but even the ones that might have brands might work with me anyway if my brand is in a different position than their brand. If I'm high price point and they're low price point, we can both coexist. So then you do your due diligence. This is really obviously very important, but it's all of that. It's like, first off, are we strategically aligned? Do you understand why we go to market the way we do? Why do we exist? Why does the brand exist? What do we do? How do we do it? Do you get it enough that you are as impassioned as we are close to it? Then look at everything. Financials. A lot of these companies are private, but you're like, look, if you want to license my brand, I need to see your P&L. I need to see your balance sheet. If you don't want to show it to me, then we don't want to have a conversation. But they have to be a certain size. You need to know they're very profitable. I was mentioning earlier that you don't want them growing. It's okay if they grow on your back, but you want them to make sure that they are financially strong before you start. And also, you want to know after your deal is expired, if it doesn't extend, that they're going to be around, because if there's something wrong with the product and there needs to be some kind of restitution, they're around to do it. Because it's your brand, but they're the ones on the hook for it. And then legal, like, is there any lawsuits that are pending or have been done, and what were they about? So you're protecting yourself. And, you know, everything from how do they do product development? How do they do marketing? Oh, they don't know how to market. Well, that could be a problem for you, unless you want to market for them, in which case you probably should just source their product. So all of those things go into due diligence. Then you start the licensing, defining license opportunity. So that's all the deal terms. What is the royalty rate? What is the minimum guaranteed royalty? What's the minimum guaranteed minimum sales target? What is their marketing commitment? All of these things have to get negotiated. And you can't be greedy. You might be the big cheese, right? You might be the huge brand. Everybody wants that brand, and you could tell them you want 15%, and they might agree to pay it. But if that makes them lose profit or barely make profit, then they're not going to be able to, it's not going to be sustainable. So if you're more interested in being in that category with a best-in-class partner, and that's the value, and then the royalties are secondary, which I would argue is the way you should think about it, then you find a royalty rate that makes sense. And we'll get into some more of that, but yeah, that's all of the, like, the deal terms. And then it's like negotiating the contract, right? So you agree on the deal terms, and then there's all that other stuff that's really important, like who owns the IP? Or what's the sell-off period once this expires? And what happens during a termination? Who's paying royalty? Are they committed to paying royalties if it terminates? Well, did you terminate it because you wanted to, or did you terminate it because they breached the contract? So all of that stuff has to get negotiated. Once that's done, you're really just starting. So in orientation, normally what happens is there's just two people talking. Yeah, there's a few on the periphery that are kind of included, but I'm negotiating with one other person. And now we have this deal, and all of you are responsible for the product development and the marketing and the selling. Don't you think you need to know what's in this contract? So we need to meet and have a good orientation meeting and go through the expectations and, hey, who are you and who am I? And now we get to know each other. And hey, I was looking at the contract, it's a little confusing on this. Am I supposed to do this or am I supposed to do that? Oh, well, yeah, it says that, but look, if you just do this, I'm okay with it. Okay, that's fine as long as we're all in agreement. So having that orientation and having a good relationship right off the bat means that you're going to be successful from the start. And then, like anything else, there has to be rigor and structure, just like it was your own company. I say manage that licensee like they were members of your own department. You're the department head. They are an extension of you. What's the routines you have set up? We have a conversation every morning, Monday morning. We talk about, what we're doing, where we're going. It's all that. But shockingly, a lot of that doesn't happen. So that's why I'm sharing it. So I've gone into this in a lot of detail, so maybe won't spend a lot of time on this. But where to play, you want a list of eligible product categories. And that's typically market research that does that, right? Or if you don't do market research initially, you should validate it with market research. I like this. I'll let you read it. It's kind of funny, but it's very powerful. So, it's have a vision for where you're taking your brand, right? And then buy into that together and help your partners understand what it is and let them buy into it. Some of these guys might be around for 10 or 15 years, might be around long after you're gone, But that is possible when everybody knows where they're going and agrees and signs up to that. There's so much tactical stuff that goes on that it's doomed to failure because there's no strategy. So where to play, we talked about that a little bit more, so I won't belabor that. Next is how to win. We talked about that, figuring out whether it's in-house or not in-house. Sorry about that. So, oops. We looked at this before, so I don't think we need to talk about that more. What are the support functions? This is important, right? So you're figuring out how to win. Who do you need to have on your team? Finance, operations, marketing, because you're doing an internal assessment. And then maybe business development, So while you may be in charge, maybe there's other resources in your company that you can tap into that can help you figure out who to think about. So this is a collaborative effort for sure. We talked about how to prospect. Interview qualified candidates to evaluate and access, So, you're meeting with these guys, right? Before you even spend a lot of time with them, you're spending a little time with them. So the conversation goes, we're going to enter this category via licensing. We found you guys. We think you could be a good fit. And we'd like to talk to your general manager or your head of business development. And if you're a brand that's like Hershey or some big brand, Georgia Pacific, there might be a lot of silence because they're like, holy smokes, these guys are thinking about talking to us about this, which means they're going to go into this with us or probably with somebody else. Maybe we should have a conversation with them. So that'll at least get you the sense of, hey, we weren't thinking of that, but we love the idea. And we're all in, or thank you for thinking of us. We know you're going to go into this category. We're just not in a position to do that right now. Okay, you at least had that conversation. So we talked a little bit about this. I always like to get at least 2 and hopefully 3 qualified. It's one of those where it's like, okay, if I have 3, then I have to do all of this for 3, so that's 3 times the work. But shockingly or not shockingly, a lot of times the companies that you think are going to be the best fit are the ones that you don't end up with. You know, it's the ones that are hungrier, see your vision, and are willing to put in the effort and the energy and the commitment and the investment. And that might be one who, it's kind of like Xavier, you know, like you didn't expect them to be in this Elite 8, but they're going to be there because they have a lot of smart people in their company. So these are the things, but let me talk about that a little bit more. I think this is typically the business development group that does this, but we're looking at you know, the strategic alignment, financial, legal, operational, and then reference checks. So those reference checks are to talk to buyers. How are these guys? How's their product? How's their servicing? How's their customer service? You know, are they best in class? Are they a category captain? What don't you like about them? You know, that'll tell you gobs. And then what's huge, if you can find it ahead of time, and some companies are like, we're only licensing with companies that already have a license as their criteria, right? Oh, you're a Disney licensee? That's a no-brainer. I mean, I almost don't have to do my due diligence because I know they've done it. So that's a huge kind of like burden off your back because you know that they have a high standard, and if they've passed that. But if they've never done licensing before, then you've got your work cut out for you. But if you do have another license, you're still going to talk to them. Hey, how are they about engaging with you? How are they about building their brand, your attributes into their product? You know, how are they on follow-up and follow-through? Well, we're actually not thinking about not renewing them. Okay, thank you for that. I don't need to bother you anymore. So this is a lot of finance and legal, because you're going to look at financial statements, and you might be, you know, because you've gone to this great business school, really good at looking at P&Ls and all that stuff, but you might want to have somebody else with a set of eyes on that, just in case. Or, you know, like a product development, right? You know, and like I said, we had them send a product to us, and we looked at it, we tested it. It's like, damn, this thing is good. Okay, that tells us a lot. They had all this patented technology. So the defining license opportunity, outcome, initial sales forecast, understanding of the licensee's strengths and capabilities, and the deal parameters. So looking at the look, feel, and product design, right off the bat, okay, how are they without us? They got great design. I mean, these guys really get it. So then give us some examples of how it would look with our brand. Wow, this is great stuff, like the licensee I found for the kitchen tools and gadgets. I was like, this is so much nicer than the stuff our stuff was so boring and dated and tired. And this was like vibrant, colorful, ergonomically designed. Then a forecast, by region, by channel, by SKU, with annual product introductions. Like, okay, what are you going to do next year? What are you going to do the year following? Yes?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
What are like the top 5 licensees in the US? Are they names that we would have heard of, or are they manufacturers?
So a lot of times they're names that you haven't heard of, like Robinson Home. You know, they are the dominant player in kitchen tools and gadgets. They don't want to build their own brand, so they're just a company. But then there's others like Nike who could be a licensor and a licensee, right? They're a huge licensee of brands like Michael Jordan, right? Or Hasbro, who's a huge licensee, or Mattel, huge licensee of Disney or Warner Brothers.
Sure.
But they have their own brands too, like Mattel has Barbie. And they're figuring it out. Hasbro's got Monopoly and Nerf, and they're building.
Franchises now. And movie franchises
Yeah, yeah. So these guys are, the smart companies are, they're going, look, the great brands, we're gonna still acquire them, but we see the value of building our own brands. So, both sides. But you definitely have those ones out there who, they just want, like the company that I connected Entrepreneur with, now I gotta remember the name, they had an acronym for their name. It's like, I've forgotten it because but I'll think of it here in a second. But literally they were an unbranded business coaching platform. And they were quite happy with that. Rich Dad Poor Dad was a license of theirs. Carlton Sheets, so investment community. And so they were like, look, we are really great at engaging people and delivering value. We get great marks. We don't care about our brand. We're happy to take someone else's. We have a formula that works. Compare sales projections and viability across licensed candidates. Here's the thing, and this gets into some of my other pitfalls, which you'll find on that platform that I talked to you about. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. They may want that license more than anything, and they're going to give you a sweet-looking forecast. And it's your job to look and go, they're never going to achieve this. So there's no way. You like them, though. You want them to be successful, and you're like, come on, guys. Thank you very much. We know that you're enamored with us, but give us a real set of numbers. They'll really appreciate that. And that may look like you're hurting yourself, but at the end, you're really helping yourself. So you have to have a good sense of forecasting and projections yourself, otherwise you won't be able to make it a determination. So that's important. So then we get into this thing called a conservative business estimator, which I'll get to in more detail, but it basically is a tool that I would give to licensees and say, look, fill this out. I want you to show me how you're going to get to this number with rigor, like you've actually thought it through. So I think it might be in order of, let's see. Yeah. So in here goes the product. So the stock keeping unit, specifically what is it, right? It's a garden dumping cart. Or it's a whole set of outdoor tools. Then the estimated number of doors that you're selling to. Okay, we are going to sell to Target, and we know that we're going to get in 500 stores. So that 500 goes in there. Not all of them, but 500, because they're going to test it. Then estimated number of units sold. Well, we got 500 stores. They're going to test it for a year. We think we can sell 200 in each store. If I do my math correctly, is that 1 million? 500 times 200? Yeah, I think so. So, not bad. Then the wholesale sales that are going to be created, right? So, in order to figure that out, we probably have to get to, and what percentage of the business? I think the estimated unit price. So maybe I skipped that earlier. Let's just see. Yeah, sorry, that was the first thing. The last thing is the door. So the unit price is the first thing. How much am I selling it to Target? The garden dumping cart sells for $100 retail. I sell it to them for $45. And then ultimately you get to the number of doors, and you get the estimated dollars per door, and then the total wholesale sales. Okay, they send this to me. I know that they've had to think this thing through, right? And by the way, they're going to do this for multiple years. So I'm going to look at the progression. How much in year one? Hopefully not. Hopefully they've realized that it's going to be a partial year, or they're just getting their feet wet. So then if it goes well, then year 2 will be more, year 3 should be more. And then effectively we get to the estimated units sold and the units per door sold. So I know with a lot of, just as a good general manager, I know that this is reasonable or not reasonable. So then I have some confidence in their projections. So we talked about negotiating the contract. You want a signed license contract with a motivated licensee. Somebody who knows they're gonna win with this. Noah, did you get involved in any of this part, or you just came in after the fact with this?
No, it was fun. It was a small company, so they were kind of like, they approached us because when you were talking about capabilities, Lego was like, we don't want to mess around with storage. We know it's a big pain point and need for our consumers. They have nowhere to put thousands of little Lego pieces they get. Like, we hear good things about you, but we don't want to deal with it. And so it was kind of like a whole company meeting. Should this actually, it's a no-brainer, but we all sat down like, this makes sense.
Yeah, so you were a motivated licensee when it was
Oh,
done,
yeah.
and it played out.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and if you had a meeting at the end of it and you'd be like, well, shoot, we are signed up for royalties that if one of these deals doesn't happen with one of our retailers, we're sunk
It
and we're
would've
gonna be
bankrupt
losing
us.
money. Pardon?
The guaranteed minimum was so big, that was the big,
Scared the heck out of you,
yeah,
right?
it was bigger than our like yearly budget, was
Wow.
the minimum, and we're just like, all right, kind of like all or nothing, let's see what happens.
Roll the dice.
Yeah.
But it paid off.
Yeah.
And so that's it, right? It's like, okay, you're the owner of the company, you're like, okay, these numbers look reasonable. We have to really step on our foot not to be successful. It's a good business risk, let's go for it.
We also had to go to our producer and say, literally, we're used to ordering this, like, we're gonna order in a month what we just ordered all last year.
Yes.
And we think that's lowballing it, that's a conservative order, it's only gonna go from there. So that was the scary part for us too, is we weren't sure our supply chain could handle it.
Yeah, that's so important. And you obviously got somebody who said that they were ready for you.
Yeah.
That's great. And this, I'm so glad you're here, because this is just reaffirms everything I'm sharing. So, this is a legal team, this is the marketing team, this is a sales, senior management. What I would do after all of this, when I was at Knoll, I literally had to write a memo to the CEO of the company, justifying why we're in this category. I mean, this is after I've committed to all of this, right? I've gotten the deal terms done. They have signed the contract. The license, we always made the licensee sign first. Then this memo goes to the CEO, and then we sign. So, dear God, help me to write the right memo, right? You know, you're writing it, you got like a format of exactly what you're trying to share. How does this build the brand? How is this good for the business? What are the risks? How we address those risks? And then you've done a good job. They're like, great news, sign it off, and you're off and running. Or, God willing, you've thought this through. They ask a question, you have an answer, and you address that answer, then they sign. But if they ask a question, you don't have an answer, you probably don't get a signed contract. And you look really silly. Try to avoid that. And then the orientation, which we talked about. Outcome, a licensee fully knowledgeable of the brand and the commercialization process. You need to know, you as a licensor need to know all about them and vice versa. Don't have this attitude of, well, we're the brand and they're the licensee and they have to follow what we do. No, you guys are partners in this. And you may be much bigger than them, but you need them to be successful and you want them to be successful. So you need to know it and help them be successful. Drive them to their own success. Use your process and your structure and your acumen to help them be successful, because that is smart business. Don't be so hung up on how great your brand is that you let them fail. And by the way, I'll just give you an example. This thing with Entrepreneur and this company that did the coaching, it was a no-brainer. I mean, it should have like crushed it. And the licensor just didn't, I mean, they were just terribly challenging with them. Like, they blocked them everywhere. They're like, we need just a little bit of presence on the website. Well, we can give it to you part of the time. Really? Because we talked about us having this permanent presence right here on the website. Well, we're selling that as ad space and, you know, okay. Well, you're going to allow us to send tailored emails to your email list that you told us about, right? Well, yeah, okay, well, that's 700,000 names, right? Well, we don't want to send it to all 700,000. Okay, why? Well, we don't want to spam them. Well, we told you that this is important. Well, how many do you want to send it to? Well, they send it to 100,000. So 1/7 of the list, and it went on like this. And so the first year they lost money, and the second year they were like, we still really believe in this. This brand is so much better known than the other ones that we have. Like, we're crushing it with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We should be doing 5 times as much. So they upped again, and these guys didn't do any better, and it fizzled after a year or two. That's a real, I mean, for me, who did that deal, I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. You guys are so effed up. I wouldn't be surprised if you're not around in a while, because this could have been bigger than your core business if you would have let these guys run with it. They're really good at what they do. They just get phenomenal testimonials. You changed my life, my business is thriving, yada, 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 yada. What a great way to grow the brand. So, I don't know if I failed in that, but I feel like I'm part of the failure because it didn't happen. We talked about the business plan, outcome, achievable targets. What's your full year number? For 3 years, we'll divide it by months. Every month we're going to talk about your numbers. Why are you on target? Why are you not on target? If you're ahead, are you ahead just for the month or for full year? Is it a timing issue? Are you actually growing faster if you're not ahead? And it's not a timing issue, what are you going to do to get back on track? Really important to do that. So continue again to work with your colleagues in the company to help you. You guys are calling on this customer, they're calling on this customer, at least talk to each other. So that when you go talk to a buyer or a retailer, you probably saw my licensee, they were in here last week pitching this channel. Yeah, they did a great job, cool. Just wanted to make sure that everything was, or you go together. Here's what we're bringing. It's like the example with the Mr. Clean. Great eye-stopping, consumer can't walk past without putting something in their basket kind of display. We love it, yeah, we'll take it in every one of our stores. So this is the commercialization timeline. I say it takes at least 2 years from the start of the conversation on should we be licensing till we actually get product to market. This is just, I talk to people and they're like, well, if you just start making something yourself, how long does it take to get? Well, probably a year. What if there's line reviews and you just missed your line review? Well, then we have to add another 6 months, So I do this to set expectations. Because if you're starting this, it's a long play. And by the way, when you get product to market that first year, it's probably not going to be a lot. But by year 3, it could be really big. Now, there's examples of garden dumping cart that sold, $500,000 in year 1 or $1 million, whatever it was. That's a good start. And, if you're thinking about how do I grow my brand, the royalties are not, and the revenue is not as important as the brand presence. Although you want to sell a lot because you believe in this product with your brand on it, you know that the consumer is going to really get a great experience out of it. So the more you can do, the better. But it takes about 2 years. It is 3:15. Holy smokes. We have till 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah,
I think we should keep pressing.
I'll have to. I appreciate your time, Pete. I gotta go. I gotta pick my mom up from the airport.
Okay.
But thank you for coming. I'm already gonna be running a little late. You're probably gonna be pissed
All right, well, let me leave you my card. Great to meet you. Take care of Mom.
I am Tony. I am
Totally
Tony. Oh.
I hope you will.
I got a vowel in the last letter of my last name. You know I'm legit.
Tony That's his brand.
So, while we're at this point, is this Are you getting out of this what you hoped to? Anything we're not covering that I should be covering?
The one question that I have is just, I mean, when you agree to royalty terms,
Yep.
I mean, is there like an industry standard that you, like as a
Great
starting spot for those negotiations? Like how do those conversations go?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. There are, for the most part, and I've actually written like a 50-page document. It's called Negotiating Licensing Deal Terms. I talk about all the terms and, you know, what they mean and how you should think about it. And so in general, let's just talk about corporate brands. If you have a best-in-class brand, then 10% is kind of a normal royalty rate for that. Now, take that kind of standard and go, okay, is this a high margin business or a low margin business? Because it's going to shift. Cosmetics, it might be 15%. Trash bags might be 5% or 4% or 3%.
Yeah.
There's just no margin in it. But I think in general, you can say, look, I've got a world-class brand, and if it's world-class, then you can say, look, this is going to drive, in Noah's case, you know, this could change your company overnight. So that's kind of a fair number. If you're an up-and-coming brand, it might be like 6% as your start, and then you shift from there.
How many companies are there like Canalichio or Luxottica, where it just seems like they've made their entire all their bones off of pure licensing? Like, are perfumes like scents that way too, right? Are there only like 2 companies that make all the perfumes, and then they just license them out to all these different companies? Like, or are there many companies that exist only in the licensing realm?
Like clothing's like that.
Yeah, clothing's like that, for sure. What I would say in these certain categories, cosmetics might be one, athletic equipment could be another, cosmetics could be another. I think what you get is these big core manufacturers, and then you have a whole bunch of smaller ones.
So this is in a lot of ways just also another way to outsource manufacturing that you just don't want to do.
Well, you're doing way more than that.
Okay.
So I would say, you know, every time you go to the where do we play and how do we win, the how do we win is to really think about it for every category, because it's like if we love our sales and marketing team and we want to put this in our portfolio of products, then you should just outsource. Make sure that they build the greatest product that you want them to make for you, and then you buy it from them at whatever the price is. But if you're like, you know what, this is a category we absolutely should be in, but we have no clue. We're not in this retail channel. We don't know this category, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be here because consumers expect us to. Then you want a company that's really great in that category. Graco, you know, when I was in Rubbermaid, it was great at car seats and like chairs, high chairs, right? We weren't good at beds, you know, infant cribs, but we were about, you know, creating this environment for babies and for their moms, you know, to trust that they were, you know, in this, you know, this really great place. So we went and found the best-in-class crib manufacturer. We were not going to try to sell that. It was a different buyer. Sometimes it was even a different channel. So it just really depends on all those factors. So this will be interesting, I think, because you guys are all brand folks. Talk about how Rubbermaid thought about this. And so this will probably take, I don't know, 30 minutes, and we'll figure out then. I think by that point we've pretty much covered everything, so the rest will be gravy if we get through it. So I'm guessing pretty much every one of you has seen at least some example of this. Have you, raise your hand if you have not, and it's fair if you haven't. Okay. So this is effectively a brand architecture. And so what we're looking at first are, it's a really small print, so the core attributes. So, you know, what are the attributes to the brand? It's enduring, it's innovative, it's a leadership. So these are the brand attributes. Then we look at the product attributes. So ergonomic, ease of use, simplicity. So these are, how does the product perform? Then you look at the functional attributes. Functionally, how does it perform? It's durable, high quality, it's great value, but we all know as brand marketers, that doesn't sell your product. But it is table stakes. You have to have that. You have to know what your brand attributes are, you have to know what your product attributes are, and you have to know what your functional benefits are. But then you get to the real meat of it, which is around this whole idea of emotional benefits. And in between that, I guess they had a core message, which is shape your space with Rubbermaid. So thinking of Rubbermaid as the, around storage and organization, we said our brand positioning was we were the company, the brand to keep you organized so that you could have, better than anyone else, you could have really a functioning home where you could have peace of mind, something like that. So we want you to feel when you buy our products and use them in control, that that you feel good about it. You have some of these I absolutely agree with. The others that I would say are like when I buy Rubbermaid, I'm proud. I'm a proud mom, because it was mostly moms that we were targeting, because I know that Rubbermaid, they make great products, and when I use these products, like my food is stored and it's maintaining its quality, so I'm giving them healthy food, and I'm just a good mom because I can do the things I want to do. And so when all of that's said and done, then I feel empowered. Well, I gotta tell you, we weren't anywhere close to this as a brand. But it was good that we aspired to it. And so I could take this and I could run with it. And I could say, okay, what are we trying to achieve as a brand? And then I could help find those partners who maybe thought like we did. And so I knew that they were going to help us achieve this goal. But I think it was definitely doable. We just weren't, it took us a while to get to this, which I think was good work. And then once we were aligned, I think it was very achievable. I am not going to read all this. But this is basically a brand positioning, right? To self, I like reading the first part. To self-assured balancers, independent, proactive women ages 18 to 54 who, in seeking to balance their lives, family, work, relationships, and self, put so much into their day they need to replenish what's been taken out. So that's a good place to start as a brand. And then what's our frame of reference, what's our point of difference, and what's the support? So those are all the things that a brand strives to do. So we then said, okay, what are a pool of categories that we could potentially go into? And this was kind of like, well, I don't know whether it was, I think we started out with, okay, let's just do brainstorming. And then I think later we validated some of this with research. But part of the research, our challenge with the research is that the consumer loved the brand pretty much anywhere, in the house or anywhere in the outdoors and a lot of other places. So what we had to say was, okay, you've given us like all these categories that we can be in, but what do we stand for? We had to go back to this. But what was happening before was, we didn't have this. And so we were licensing in categories back to, the general manager trying to make his target so he can get his bonus. Now that we have this platform, we can go, okay, we're about empowerment, we're about storage and organization. We can think about what categories make the most sense. But we were in auto electric coolers, we were in bath mats, we were in car mats. In fact, bath mats is one of the things that they first created. Car mats, doormats, dumping carts, food storage. Trying to look at some of the other ones. Ironing boards. So some of these we were in, and some of them we would consider being in. And I'm not going to tell you all of them because we're going to have a little exercise in a minute. So we look at a pool of prospective categories. You got a kitchen step ladder. You have food storage. You have doormats, role play toys, electrical cords and reels,
Wondering what those were.
Oh, role play toys?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, start them young,
Yeah.
right? Caterpillar does it.
Wow, sorry, triggered.
Kitchen cabinet lighting. So then what we did was, what we were charged to do, which I think is really important, is we had to write a category statement that supported the brand positioning. So, how about the electrical cords? Enables do-it-yourself dads to power their tools and garden accessories, making repair and maintenance a breeze. That sounds reasonable. You can almost buy it. Role play toys. Makes a child's role play a favorite Rubbermaid products exciting and inspirational. Or the garden dumping cart. The step ladder. For moms who are trying to keep their kitchens organized, who need access to all their kitchenwares. So that's kind of the way you think about it, right? Then you go, okay, do we have the ability, this is the where to play. Can we do this internally? Yes, no, or no, yes, no, no, yes, no. So in 2 cases, the food storage and the role play toys, we could do it. The other ones, we cannot do it. We don't have the capability. So they start to look at, okay, well, should we license? And if so, let's at least look at the growth in the category first. Maybe this is a dog category. We don't want to waste our effort. So food storage, well, we're already in this thing, even if it's like shrinking. We're not leaving it. Not yet, anyway. And in the case of kitchen lighting, big time growth, 11%, wow. Electrical cords, 4% growth, and floor mats, an 8% growth. And then look at the number of competitors. So this is kind of all of your due diligence, right? Your prospecting. Ensure category positioning aligns with the brand positioning. So, we've talked about the category, we talked about the brand positioning. So my question to you, you don't have to answer, but you can, is which of these categories fits with the brand positioning?
Food storage. Food storage.
Food storage, that's an easy one.
Step ladder.
Step ladders, probably.
Maybe the lighting.
Lighting?
I don't think lighting.
I mean, you're saying 18, 15, 54-year-old mothers looking to refuel, right? And if that's enhancing their cooking experience, right?
Oh, I like your logic.
I mean, if
Stretch though.
I mean, better than electrical cords and reels.
But
Well, that's good.
But that, because all the rest are for mom, right? The toys and the electrical cords are for kids and dads. The doormat works because durability, Rubbermaid makes a durable, dependable product. It's gonna be sitting outside your house. Should be.
It's gonna help you keep your house organized, clean, right?
Organized. Lighting
Yeah.
helps with organization. I'm sold on lights.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a chance. Plus it's fragmented, so you have an opportunity. There's an opportunity.
Spoken like a true general manager. I love it. Okay, let's keep going. I loved all your answers. We're gonna find out who's right, but I love that you guys are thinking right. So before we get there, let's do a SWOT. What are the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats? You guys are like, God, if I've seen this like once, that's too many times. So this is important to do, right, on each one of these.
His thing just went off.
So, we threw out the reels because they're for dads, and that's not our target. We threw out the play toys because it's not our target, right? I love it. I think it's cool, but it's not our target, so it just doesn't make sense. And we're left with ladders, mats, and lighting. So if we have to pick one, let's see what this says.
These are the ones that you could license because you didn't have in-house production for them, right?
Yeah. So which of these 3 categories aligns best with the Rubbermaid brand?
I gotta see the growth in composition, but.
What were you saying?
I mean, then I think you're gonna try to choose the most profitable or potentially the one you can play in the best.
No, I would say no. We're really because remember, it's about brand alignment.
Can you go back to the table
Yeah.
that has
Yeah,
the
the
market
position
growth?
statement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I forget what it was.
it's,
There.
Oh, that's not.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was looking at
several level step ladder.
I think, can you go back to the position statement too?
I love it. You guys, I love this, that you're like pushing hard. That's good.
Step ladder.
Let me go back, sorry.
Well, no, the top
bad.
of the brand promise is, what was the brand promise? Because that's what I think of, it's short, sweet.
Yeah.
Shape your space.
Empowerment, yeah,
Helps empowerment.
so that's very.
Step ladder empowers.
But,
But let's go through the whole thing, right? This is great that you guys are, this is exactly what you need to be doing.
I'm Matt, which always makes me laugh.
So,
My house.
if we think about those three categories, we could probably make an argument that functionally, they, and product-wise, they meet all of those criteria. And the core message is shape your space with Rubbermaid.
But the product attributes, ergonomic, engineered, easy to use, simple. Doormat.
Kitchen ladder.
Yeah, I think ladder.
I love the mat.
I love this dialogue, I really
Ladder
do.
is
I mean, I love the mat.
But there's also 6 versus 8% growth rate, so if you're trying to figure out really, I mean, if
What are your
it's.
margins though?
I think your margin's probably gonna be strong, you're rolling out rubber that goes on the floor that costs a
yeah,
penny.
price point.
You know, what do
Yeah.
you
But
cost?
what can you charge?
what are you
What can
willing
you
to
charge
pay?
for a
What's the
doormat?
ultimate- what's the contribution margin at the end? I mean, I paid
Holly,
18
how do you
bucks for
feel
my
about
doormat.
doormats? How much would you? I mean,
$5.
$5 for one.
I mean,
Get one
a
free.
step ladder I'm willing to
Right,
pay
and it
for
costs
a
a penny
nice.
to make, you paid 25 bucks for it, that's
I hate that.
So maybe we should go to the emotional benefits. So, if you guys kind of diss the lighting, which,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Except for
this young man. So let's,
I'm telling you, man, it's about the
okay,
lighting.
Where do you put it? That's a good point.
creativity, customizable, control, respect and trust, and fun.
Lighting does fit that.
I mean,
Lighting.
you can have a creative doormat, you can't have a creative step ladder.
Sure you can.
Sure you can.
You can have a creative.
Just make it pink.
Yeah. I was thinking color.
The lighting is the most underrated facet of
Okay.
anything.
It's a.
So let's listen, tell me your name again.
Steven.
Steven, let's listen to what Steven has to say.
Runner. I think I think the latter makes the most sense. It aligns most closely with this brand's essence because a doormat is not something that you use every day. You don't that doesn't help you in your life every day. A stepladder is something a lot more functional. It improves your experience in the kitchen, especially if you're short, and
Empowers you.
it empowers you to do more. If you can't reach something,
You get a box.
no, you need the stepladder. That's not as effective as a Rubbermaid.
Could you
What-
specify,
what-
are you talking
without-
about
you know,
a
the step ladder,
doormat
you're
that
not putting
goes
stuff up that high in
outside
the
of
first
your
place,
door?
because
Or are you talking about a kitchen mat that's like a padded thing in front of your sink?
Well, actually, we're talking about doormats.
That it unleashes the potential.
So
full
inside your
potential
door, outside your door,
Yeah.
not a
I
kitchen
usually
mat.
all the
Everybody.
storage space.
On the
Yeah.
side.
All right,
Storage
I love
space
this
for
dialogue, this is exactly what I expect, and if I talk to your professors, I'm gonna tell them how great a job you guys did in thinking this through.
Come on, doormat, come on.
What's behind the
Watch
door
me the
number
lighting.
3?
And the winner is,
Yeah.
Hey, there's a step ladder.
That's an almond.
Obvious,
all wrong.
obvious.
It's an
Hold on.
almond. It's
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
So,
now, I love your passion, and I will tell you that I actually licensed the brand in that category, but I went for a company, I licensed in this category too. I thought this was a better one that met, but I said, okay, if we're gonna get into doormats, where's the innovation? And so I found a company that actually had like a 3-step process like from the outside to the inside. And this was an English company, so it kind of made sense because they have a lot of issues with like dirt and water and all that. So like there was a part on the outside where you could like literally, I think, clean your boots or take them off and leave them there. And then there was like a second step and a third step. And so there was a whole bunch of ergonomics around it. And it wasn't just your typical, I've got a mat with some rubber with some like, like catchy, material, which by the way gets dirty really fast. So into like a system. And so for that, I thought, okay, this does bring innovation to this category, and I'm all about it. But the latter, absolutely, especially for the primary target, which is female, who tends to be 5'4" or 5 or something, this can really help her. So we not only looked at this category, but we demand it more than just helping her get higher. So here's the process. You've seen this before, so I won't repeat it. But we then looked and said, okay, who are the prospective companies? Let's go find them. We looked at Hoover's and D&B and HFN.
How did you, I guess, going through that process, like did you go to like a ladder trade show? Like
Yeah. The Houseware show or the Homeware show. And we did store walks.
Okay.
We literally went in stores and said, who's got ladders here? And which ones do we like? So it was very proactive.
Gotcha.
Reactive is like 5% of this. It's 95% proactive. You go find who you want, just like you're prospecting for your company. Who's that really superior MBA grad? So yeah, so that's what we did. Basic checklist of parameters. What might some of those parameters be? We're a little brain dead, so I won't ask you to. I'll give you the answer. You've been working way too hard. So I want to know price, geographic reach, service, financial health, innovation, continuous improvement, quality, product scope, capacity, history, and dependence on the supplier, Noah. Love that you're here today. It's like validating everything.
You're welcome, everyone.
So then, what's your expectation in these areas? Low, extensive, high, strong, ongoing high, broad, available, market success, and low dependence. So these guys, I would have been a little bit nervous. And I should have been, because they were dependent. And so probably what I would have said to them, I was like, hey, Noah, we're prepared to give you this license if you tell me, or we're going to meet with your supplier, and we want to make sure these guys are on board. That's fair, right? Because you don't want them to fail, and you don't even spend 6 months or 9 months negotiating this deal. Your reputation's at risk. You want them to succeed, so you want to help them in every way possible. So then there's the grades, A, B, C, and D companies. We'll get through that a little bit. So interview each of the prospective licensees to evaluate and assess their interests. Like I said before, they may be like, holy smokes, Hershey wants to issue me a license? I died and gone to heaven. I mean, this is the greatest thing ever. Or, we are just not ready for that. There's no way we can do it. You need to know that, right? You want to, just like anything else, right? It's like dating, right? You want somebody that you like who likes you. You don't want to have to be fighting to get their attention. So you want them all in for you. We are you want us, you would consider, absolutely, we're going to give you 110%. You can count on us. Who might you want to speak with at each company to find this out?
CEO.
Yeah, probably a good answer, right? Especially if you're like a Hershey, right? You want to talk to the senior person in the company. You want to know their own board.
Pennsylvania. Top chocolatier.
Top chocolate cube.
Who else? Who else might be a kind of good backup if the CEO's not maybe it's a pretty good sized company. It's a Hasbro.
Operations for sure.
Do they have the capacity to do it? Because that's really the bottleneck.
Yeah. Who's probably going to want to talk to you?
Finance. marketing.
Maybe business development, right?
Yeah.
What did I say? What do you want to say? Yeah, I want to know what you want to say. You're going to call them up.
Hey, this is Bob Iger at Disney. I think that it'd be great if you put, I don't know, Elsa onto these pajamas. There you go. And
Ice cubes. Clever, ice cube
Like
tray.
an ice cube tray.
make an ice cream tray for Frozen.
Ah.
That's brilliant. Right, so it fits. I think that's a pretty easy sell, right?
Yeah,
It's
if you're-
Disney.
If it's Disney.
Damn, that's a good idea.
That is a good idea.
Yeah.
I love it.
lost my train.
Except what happens to Elsa's face when it melts?
Same thing that happens to the snowman.
Maybe you create something that's permanently,
He turned into a puddle.
permanent shape and just cools, you know, like, and it doesn't hurt you. I don't know.
But they're gonna wanna know what's in it. What's in it for
whiskey
us.
roast.
Well, we're gonna try, we're gonna
Also-
be the weeds here first. If you say you have that
Sure.
market research to back it up, and, I mean, and that is, good. Do you cold call if you're interested in this, and then
You might.
you cold call, like,
Yeah.
you just
Oh, yeah.
call their.
You want
mean,
to buy.
in that case-
I mean,
I've done it all, right? I've like connected on LinkedIn and reached out, but I've actually literally said, look, I'm gonna call these guys up and just see what happens. You know, hey, Pete Canalichio, calling from Rubbermaid. I'm running the Rubbermaid licensing program. We're going to go into step ladders. We've identified your company as a possible fit. Who can we talk to about licensing our brand to you? And then a lot of times I would get like, hold on, like scurry, you know, like 5 minutes later. Hi, this is Linda Thomas. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. I'm the CEO. How can I help you? And then we'd have the conversation again. She'd be like, wow, that's really interesting. Well, we were interested. Let us think about this. What can you tell us? And we tell them, and we're like, okay. And then it would start a good conversation, or they'd be like, sometimes it'd be like, oh, we can make that for you. Yeah, we also want you to market and sell it. Oh, well, we're used to. Yeah, that's sourcing. We do that. That's not what we're talking about today. No, I'd have to have those kind of conversations. I have to educate them. It's part of the reason I do this today, because I wanted them to understand. Then they'd be like, you mean we could get your brand, put it on our product, just pay a percentage of it, and like, we're like, yeah. Oh, we're definitely interested. That is like the coolest thing ever. Never heard of it, but yeah, sure. It is crazy, but all that happened.
Wild West, man.
All right, perform due diligence. We talked about this before. All these things are really important. Quantify each company based on data collected. Okay, so we're going down a little path here, so we'll keep going. So rank of market share in the category. Prospect A is third, B is first, prospect C is fourth, prospect D is second. The channels are in mass, department stores, mass, and department stores. Financial strength, medium, strong. Other license agreements held in the category, none. Gorilla Ladders, none. And Stanley.
Do you want to partner with the segment leader? Because now you're having them compete with the other product that might, or is it doesn't matter because you're just growing the margin pie for them.
Yeah, it doesn't, because
It's still
what
not
I would love to have the segment leader if they believe in my brand. They might want to license my brand to keep their competitors from having it. And in which case then they might just do the slow roll with me, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting 5% of their business when I could get 50% of number 2 or number 3 or number 4. So you have to factor all that in. They're playing you or they really believe in it. Product innovation capability, no, yes, yes, and yes. Is there any one of these we want to throw out right off the start? Yeah, I think so, right?
Even though they were the best on the other chart from.
Yeah, they had a lot of things going. They may not be able to cut it financially, they don't have any innovation, and they don't have anybody else. At least the other two have a license. That gives me, like I said, a high comfort level. So which are your top 2 candidates?
Go with the experience ones.
D&D.
Yeah.
You guys are just crushing it. Just
Oh.
over it. Overachievers.
All day on Tuesday.
All day crushing ladders.
Is there a concern, though, if you become 50% of someone's business? I mean, isn't that somewhat of a concern for you? Because don't you typically want to be maybe lower? You want to be somewhere around 25? I mean, I don't know. For me,
Again,
I'm-
great general management comment. So I love that you have that.
Sorry.
I mean, you're doing no, there's no apology. That if you are too high a percentage, they could be at risk, for sure. So
Yeah.
I think that is a fair, like in their case with Lego.
Yeah, that would terrify me.
Yeah, like you're the only ones. What were you making, Noah?
It's like toy storage. There's a playmat that sits and built like a store.
So if that thing like ends up being a great product and something happens to them, you are screwed in that category. So yeah, I would think that that should be somewhat concerning. So
I mean,
I said 50 just because it's like, okay, you want them in, but you can't help it, right? If you're a great brand, it doesn't matter how strong they are. Like they could be a $100 million company, you might make them a $500 million company. If they're a $25 million company, maybe that's too small because they could make a $500 million company, then that's really a problem. So yeah, I think it's definitely a valid point. Okay, so look, feel, design, proposal, ladder companies. So prospect B, background information, financials, and schematic, and for D as well. So let's keep going. Define product offering and how it fits with the Rubbermaid brand. So here are the 2 different products. Just in general. Any takeaways?
D looks more like a painting step ladder, or because it's got the slots for the screwdrivers in it, and the little thing for the.
I don't see M1 mask on.
Any other comment?
D just
I
looks
like D.
easier, like
It's
the
like it sets
folding
up on it.
mechanisms, having it fold out looks a lot cleaner and
Put your drink,
smoother.
right?
Put my
Yeah.
cocktail.
Put your glass of
Yeah.
wine on that.
Yeah.
I like D, yes.
Okay, good comments. Anyone here ever used a kitchen step ladder? Okay. So I would ask you, when you use it,
They don't look like
Desiree,
Yes.
I remember your name.
diesel.
When you use a step ladder, have you ever, is it just like, hey, I'm gonna get it to the top shelf, grab whatever it is and come back down? Or has there ever been a point where you've wanted to have some kind of a tray to put something on before you've gotten down?
No, I've never needed a tray.
Okay. Has anyone ever used, it's a kitchen step ladder, but I mean, maybe it could be multifunctional. Maybe you want to change a light bulb. I change a lot of light bulbs, and I'm always carrying, they're always going out. Even the ones that are supposed to last forever are going out. I don't know what that's about. But I'm always carrying the one that I'm replacing it, and I'm lazy. So I climb to the top, I unscrew the thing. If I have a tray, I put it on the tray, I unscrew the bulb, and then I take the one that's on the tray and I put it in there. Just something to consider, right? Is it necessary? No, it still functions, but it could be beneficial.
Why not offer both in that instance? So you have a form and you have a function option within this realm now. So if it's important to you that the thing looks good, I don't know how many people admire the step ladder, but it might matter. Ladder matter? I'm rhyming. I can't help it. Or well, could you do both? Is that generally? I mean,
Back to your point earlier, I don't want to license 2 companies. I'm going to negotiate a non-exclusive deal, but I am going to act with exclusivity. So I'm going to pick one. So we'll keep going, but look, I love the conversation. All right, I gotta look at this from here because I cannot see it from there. So you're just basically asking them their sales projections.
Exactly the same.
And I think this is somewhat helpful. One of them is like $787,000. But here's kind of more like the simplified version for you guys. So, company B and company D. So B sells in the US and Canada, and here's all the different retailers they sell in: Walmart, Target, Kmart, JCPenney, Sears, and in Canada, Canadian Tire, Rona, Walmart.
Ooh,
Not
they got Sears.
Because they put Sears.
They got Sears.
Yeah.
Sears
Ooh,
first.
ooh. Touch that with a 10-foot pole, man. Ooh.
Like, why would you put Sears right
Isn't
next to it?
JCPenney and Sears the same?
Anna,
Yeah, but Penny's a little bit better than Sears.
We got Walmart.
They got the Kmart on there.
Kmart is Sears, right?
Walmart, Target, they got Home Depot, Target, Home Depot.
So they both
I mean, they're both.
It's a wash. I mean, this is not telling you much.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are not stuck on the fact that one's slightly higher than the other.
It doesn't ever just have a little side conversation right there. How closely did you really look into where your Rubbermaid shopper consumer already is? Do you give a lot of weight to that, or are you more excited, like when you look at a department store versus the other mass market? Do you want to go where you are, or are you excited to enter a new store?
I'm excited to enter a new store if my customer is there, because I'm hoping that my entry with their product will get shoppers, consumers excited, which then will get the buyer excited, and then we'll be going like, we ought to put some totes in here, or food storage in here. Then me, little licensing manager, have like really changed my company, right? Because these guys might do $33 in 2020, that could be 33,000 or 33 million or who knows what in between. But what if they bring in food storage because of that? And I bring in $100 million worth of business. So it's great to have that. So yes, getting into a new channel, you want to do it any way you can, and especially if you like, we think we are great in department stores. I don't know why our products aren't in there, but we've never been able to break the surface. Well, these guys are already in there. Could be it, right? So yeah, good point not to get too stressed out. 44 or 51 is pretty much a wash. We said it's a wash. Finalize licensing deal terms as the basis of the contract. Have senior management engage function heads. So this is all about the conversation, including that memo to the CEO, right? I want everybody, hey, here's A, here's B. We're leaning towards B or A, but both of them are solid candidates. If we could only get one, we would be happy with either one. Confer on goals with each department, ensure they're aware, committed, and accountable. Because like I said, once my deal is done, you guys are going to help these guys be successful, and their success is our success. So everybody has to buy in. We're skipping the break because we have 10 minutes. All right. In lack of time, we're not going to do the negotiation, but let's go through it. So what I would have done was given each of you a little, I'll just read the synopsis because that'd be kind of fun. Noel Rubbermaid, a Fortune 500 company, is a global marketer of consumer and commercial products with sales over $6 billion and a strong portfolio of brands including Rubbermaid, Sharpie, Graco, etc. The Rubbermaid brand has, over the past several years, been one of the foremost houseware brands in the world, making durable, innovative products that help simplify people's lives. It's now March 2017, and the marketing department at Rubbermaid wants to grow their brand further. They have researched product categories for possible brand extensions, but are yet to zero in on any category. So this is kind of a little bit different, but we'll just pretend it's the stepladder categories. Once they have identified the product category, they would like to determine how they should go about producing and marketing the category. Through the team, though the team has conducted some market research, including secondary research and focus groups, they just cannot find the time to take this forward. Your job, John, if you choose to accept. They would like to see the selected category in the market by January 19, 2019. They have decided to hire a branding and licensing expert to pursue this opportunity. You are to engage in a mock negotiation on either behalf of Rubbermaid or the company that wishes to license the Rubbermaid brand. There will be a separate sheet with additional information regarding the optimal and minimal terms for each. Good luck. So basically I had you on either side and gave you parameters and, you know, like duke it out. But it's really not about duking, because at the end you guys have to kind of find that middle space where they're both successful. So this is kind of the meet and greet for an orientation session. All this stuff should be covered. It should take you at least a half a day, because you want to talk about the vision for the company and why we're going and what we're doing, and get them excited about being on board. And they want to tell you what they're doing in product innovation, what their plans are. They want to show you some examples, understand your process, get to know you. You should do something social. You guys at least have a rapport. So a month from now or 2 weeks from now, they can call and go, hey, Austin, how's it going? Hey, John, doing well. Look, we're really excited about this. Can I send it over to you? Yes, send it to me now. Here's our shared drive. I'll take a look. Because it says in the contract you have 2 weeks to review, and you don't want to wait 2 weeks if you don't have to. That's just in case. So there's typically, you know, a whole process of approval, who's looked at it, signed off on it. We'll keep going through this. Here's what the approval sheet looks like. Here's some 30, 60, 90 kind of steps that you'd want to go through. Just all the rigor, right? Determine manufacturing execution steps and timing. Review plans on a timely basis. There's a dashboard. So there's a monthly review. Hey, what are you selling? How much are you getting? Let's make sure we're on track. There's your projections. Are they good? Are they not good? Why aren't they good if they're not good? Utilize review to amend the process, amend the brand plan. Okay. So I think we just keep going. Some of the highlights we covered. So I think I took out that one. The choice we ended up going with was choice B, because of the step ladder, because of the organization. We said we wanted to help them be more organized, and we liked the innovative part of that. And yes, it could be used in like a garage setting, but we liked that that it was multi-purpose in that regard. We liked that they had also done some, interestingly enough, so here's my little, which I didn't share with you. The company that made A, the first one with around, actually made B. So they made B for us. And what they did is they took our brand attributes and built it into the step. So it was high raised rubber with our dynamic wave in it. And they made it more stable and secure, so it wouldn't move as much. And they made the steps a little wider, so mom could feel more secure. And then that, sometimes you need a screwdriver in the kitchen. And so there was a place to put that if she needed it, that kind of thing. So we love their innovative thinking. This was the same company that made the garden doggy card. So we just really liked the way that they approached the market, and we knew they would be successful. So last sheet is just a little bit on mine. Again, I mentioned that if you go to my website and sign up, there we can start a dialogue. I would love to do that just to help you guys as much as possible. And I literally have 3 minutes. So what didn't we cover? Anything? Okay, quiet. So I guess that's a good sign. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
There's not a lot of professors that would have kept us this calm for 4 hours.
Yeah, you did.
We'll be that calm.
You should be.
Thanks, guys. Set us up.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, that was so interesting.
UGA is doing well. You guys are really sharp. I love the pushback. I love the challenge. I love the thinking. I definitely will share those comments. You guys are smart. I'm not surprised you're going to good companies. Good luck to you, and let me help you. I'll leave a few cards if you want it, but, please sign up if you want. Lots of good information there to keep the dialogue going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, JD.
On to the next one.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
double
net
dipping.
impact. You guys have fun. Oh, is that in this room?
It's upstairs.
Oh, it's upstairs. I've got your son in my car and I'll be like, always put that. Oh, wait, are you spending time together? Yeah.
Great to meet you guys. My pleasure.
So if you enjoyed this as much as we did,
I loved it. Loved it.
certainly
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, please stick around.
Yeah, thank you.
Set ladder.
I'm all about that stuff. There's a lot of value in a grant process, and people don't give it enough credit.
Good night, sir.
I used to work in
Thank
your
you.
brand.
I'm just thinking about
Yeah,
basketball.
and we used to write those kind of statements and spend hours and hours on them, and some people just like,
I'd love to introduce you guys. I would welcome it.
Okay.
That'd be great. Take care, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, good,
I
I'm really
really
glad you
enjoyed
liked
it.
it.
I thought it was wonderful.
You guys are making me feel great. I'm going into the weekend
You
feeling.
really should be impressed though. You kept us quiet and focused and engaged. Fine, and
I was like,
engaged.
how quiet were
Fine,
we?
well, not fine. I meant.
No, yeah, you definitely weren't
We were
quiet, but
focused.
yeah. And I really, this is, I've taught 3 marketing undergrads, and I'm like, this is what I miss. I want pushback. I want you guys to have a passion about why you believe what you believe. I want you to challenge me. And I still learn, right? So I might have answers, but like, when he said, hey, 50%, that's a little high, I'm like, that's a good point. It is high. You'd be a little bit nervous, as I'm sure they were with you, so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Please keep in touch.
We were quiet. We were focused and
Yeah.
engaged, which sometimes we aren't always.
My classes